Hi, this is Steve Downs, the voice of Master Chief. You're listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net. Finish the fight.
They let me pick. Did I ever tell you that? Choose whichever Spartan I wanted. You know me. I did my research, watched as you became the soldier we needed you to be.
Our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity, whatever the cost.
Then listen up! Usually the good Lord works in mysterious ways, but not today. This here is 66 tons of straight-up, HE-spewing divine intervention. If God is love, then you can call me Cupid.
Sir, permission to leave the station.
For what purpose, Master Chief?
To give the Covenant back their bomb.
Permission granted.
Greetings, Spartans, and welcome to the Office of Naval Intelligence. You know us as ONI. I am Spartan Mike 260, joined by my AI companion, the guy in the back of my head.
Alex, I didn't think of a clever name, buddy.
Well, hey, you get to be the little AI that says, hey, do you want to stop getting shot? Or, hey, there's a weapon over there. You should do something with it.
Or wait, I can be the AI that goes, no thank you, I'm betraying everybody and leaving.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be a good time. So once again, folks, welcome to ThisWeekInGeek.net. We have been around for over 15 years now. And it's time to wind back the clock, to go all the way back to the year 2007, when I was just a baby broadcaster from Niagara College. And we used to do weekly topic shows, and those were sort of the staple of This Week in Geek for many, 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 many years. And then life got busy, life got in the way, people changed, people came and went. And I decided it's time to return to roots, though not weekly, because that's an insane production schedule and me and Alex would like to sleep at some point.
Yes, we still like doing our regular news and doing our regular shows, but an additional topic show with this much research is a full-time job.
Yeah, pretty much. So this first topic show, and there's going to be a couple of these sprinkled throughout the year, we're going to focus on one of the first topics we ever talked about. But before we go any further, I have to thank Microsoft Canada. I have to thank Paramount Home Entertainment. I have to thank Jazwares. And I have to thank pretty much the community from Halo, the Halo subreddit. A lot of these guys have helped make this show come true. And if you can't guess by now, we're talking about the gargantuan video game media property known as Halo, which began with Bungie, then was passed on to 343, and now we're into Halo Infinite now, and it's been just one of those quests that we have had a chance to experience through the eyes of the Master Chief. We've had the game in arcades, we've had different versions of multimedia, different types of games. We've had shooters, we've had real-time strategy, we've had even twin-stick shooters. It's been an experience to say the very least. So we're also going to be talking with some more people during the show to make this more in line with our older topic shows. We actually have a couple of interviews. We're going to be talking with Halo author Matt Forbeck. He's done a couple of different novels in the Halo universe. So we're going to be talking to him what it takes to create lore and create characters in the wider Halo universe. And then finally, we're going to be talking with some people from Jazwares, who are some of the current IP holders and licensees who work on some of the toys for Halo. Most notably, there's a new Master Chief helmet, which you heard me review on last week's show. We're going to be talking with Gregory Mitchell. He's the Vice President of Brand Action and Collectibles at Jazwares, and Senior Designer Jesse Hensley. And we're going to talk about what it takes to create these awesome figures, either in the Star Wars sort of like 3.75 to 4-inch scale, all the way up to the 12-inch scale and beyond. So we got some really, really, really cool stuff to talk about today. So I guess we're going to start things off with, well, where things all began for us in Halo. And for me, this goes all the way back to the fall of 2001. I remember I was young. I had just gotten out of a really bad relationship. So I'm not in a great headspace. Mind you, I'm with a new girlfriend. and I'm a little bit reckless with a credit card. And I remember,
to say the least.
to say the least, and I go to one of those rent to own places, right? And I buy myself a brand new 32-inch CRT TV. This thing was a monster. And I went to EB Games, and which is now GameStop in Canada, and I bought my first Xbox. And the first game I bought two games. I bought Robotech Battle Cry, because back then I was a huge Veritech fan. I loved the anime. I thought it was cool. And I bought Halo Combat Evolved. And unfortunately, I had to return that Xbox about 2 weeks later just because bills, but it left an impression on me. So years would go by, relationships would change, my financial situation would change, and I got another Xbox. And I remember I got Halo 2, and I remember I was talking to my girlfriend at the time on the phone, and I'm playing the final mission in Halo 2. And right when Lord Hood, so when Hellboy is talking to the Master Chief, he says, "Master Chief, what are you doing on that ship?" And when the Chief says, "Finishing this fight," and I'm like, all right, cool, there's going to be one more level. Credits.
Oh.
And I remember saying to my girlfriend, "What the hell is going on?" I was so upset. And then obviously years would pass, and I would start college in the fall of 2006, and Halo would come out in 2007, the fall. And I remember this was one of my first media events I ever covered as TWIG. We were at the midnight launch for Halo 3 in Toronto. Now, I'd had a chance to play it at a press event earlier that summer, an event that Microsoft Canada used to throw called the X event, which it would go through X07 was the first one I attended. And I think the last one I did was like X14 or something. And anyway, so I go there, and they have cosplayers in full Mjolnir armor. This guy was really great. He never talked. He just waved around the prop. It was a fairly good cosplay, but that was the first time I met the Master Chief, though it wasn't the last. And if you heard off the top of the show, that promo, I recorded that at Fan Expo 2008 or 7. I can't remember which. And I got a chance to sit down and talk with Steve Downes, who's the voice of Master Chief. And I told him I was in school for radio, and we talked about that. And then if you remember the website screwattack.com,
Yes,
I got the Master Chief to do a bunch of promos for Hard News. And I found out years later, a friend of TWIG, I wish I could remember this fan's name, told me he asked about me at a convention, and Steve Downes says, like, "Oh, the big guy from Toronto, right?" He remembered me. So I thought that was really cool. And then I went to a couple of other Halo events over the years. I went to the launch for Halo 3, ODST. I went to the launch for Halo Wars, and
didn't you do Reach as well?
Yep, I did Reach, which this is kind of a sadder story, and then there'll be a sadder one later. Because I'm a fairly large man, I got one of the Halo Reach hoodies. Now, unfortunately, I'm a very big guy. This thing didn't fit me, but it fit my future father-in-law, David. So my dad, Dave, wore a Halo Reach training hoodie from the Onyx facility for years. And before he died, I remember Blair telling me it was one of his favorite hoodies, and he loved it. And I don't know where it ended up after he died. I think it got thrown out because I think he spilled bleach on it or something, but he was really upset that he ruined it. And then finally, I've been to every single midnight launch, retail or not, for Halo, with the exception of Infinite, because, it just came via code for me, but also with the world being the way it is. I don't
think they did midnight launches for it here.
No. But one of the most important memories to me is in my first Christmas I spent with Blair, who then became my future wife. It turns out there was trouble in paradise. She was prepared to leave me before Christmas. I didn't know this until years later because I was so busy in second year college. I didn't get a chance to call her a bunch. I would see her on the weekends, but during the week I was so busy with school, it was just enough to keep going, right? So I came home for Christmas with her. I spent Christmas with her and her family because things were bad back where I was from. And the first Christmas gift she ever gave me was the Halo 3 Master Chief Legendary Edition, which had the aforementioned cat helmet in it. And I cried. I was so happy. I never thought I could find one of these things. At the time, they were near impossible to find. Now, on Facebook Marketplace, you can find them anywhere between $50 to $150 in complete but not sealed condition. So years upon years later, I would have to sell a lot of my Halo collectibles because I needed to buy a wheelchair after my amputation happened in 2017. And the first piece I sold, unfortunately, was my Master Chief helmet. I know where it is, but it's not coming home. So that's kind of a sad story with that. But when I think about all the times me and my wife Blair have spent at these midnight launches, because she would drive me to many of them, she would be there with us. She would be there taking pictures. And I remember it was the launch for Halo 4. I got to meet the Master Chief again, not Steve Downes. In the movie Forward Until Dawn, he's played by Colossus. And you're thinking, well, what the hell does that mean? That's Daniel Cudmore, I think was the kid's name. And this guy is 6'8", I think. And he is a giant of a human being, but one of the kindest souls I've ever met. And I got to do an interview with him during the Halo 4 launch event. And we just sat there and we just talked about X-Men stuff. We talked about Halo and everything. I'm like, dude, what was it like to wear the armor? And he was like, honestly, it was actually pretty awesome. Because it was like, at that time, I think it was made of foam, some fiberglass, and
yeah,
some
we've come
other
a
stuff.
long way from the era of rubber suits.
Yeah, but I think for certain stunts, it was rubber, but only because, stunts hurt less in fiber. Stunts hurt less in rubber as opposed to fiberglass.
Also, you're less likely to have a piece of it shatter on you.
Yeah, exactly. Much like a round from a needler, you don't want that. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else to really mention, but it's always been with me, and it's been with my wife forever. And Halo gave me my freedom back. It gave me my wheelchair. And my wife is even promising me right now, because I typically go overboard for Valentine's Day, to say the least.
Oh, you don't say?
You don't say. This year, I did something very, very special for her. I'm getting her in Halo Infinite's storefront. A couple weeks ago, there was something you could get for your helmets called cat ears, and they're just as goofy as it sounds. So I'm getting her a 3D printed Halo helmet like she got me, but with cat ears on it. And it's the model from in-game. It's been ripped from the files directly. And my 3D printer guy is making it for her. And it'll be done in black and hot neon pink, like the neon Superfly armor coating you could have got a few weeks ago, too. And it's going to look really, really, really awesome. So in return, she's getting me a ODST Hell Jumpers tattoo on my right arm, which is pretty much my gaming arm anyway. So that'll go above my N7 tattoo, my sniper tattoo, and it's going to be the ODST helmet with the kind of background for it, which will be really, really, really cool. So those are some of my experiences with the games. And then, Alex, I guess I will ask you, what has your experiences been with this franchise that's been around since the early 2000s?
Well, I obviously don't have as deep a connection as you, as I started heavily playing it a lot more recently, but I do have a couple stories here that I know I've never told you. My first experience with it was actually a teacher bringing in his Xbox into my high school to play when it was, I think it was like nearing the end of the school year. I would have been, Halo was it 01? The original
I think
Halo?
so. Yeah. Yeah.
01, yeah. So it would have been 01 to 02. So yeah, I would have been in grade 9, and I was in a computer class, and it was nearing the end of the year when they would do like activity days where sometimes people would like go bowling. You know, I don't know if your school ever did that, but we would do this where like there's a week, 2 weeks before the end of school, there'd be an activity week where it's like you could go swimming or go bowling, and it was all class trips and stuff. And for those of us that had a free day where we didn't, have anything planned for that, he brought in the original Xbox, hooked it up to a projector, which we were like, you could do that, with like a VGA port and all this cabling and stuff. And then he brought in 4 controllers. And I remember laughing at how hilariously heavy the controller was. Like, I had big hands, so it was good for me, but all the small little kids, it was too much. But that's when I had heard of Halo. But, I don't think I had cable TV at that time. I had seen ads at game stores, and they're like, everybody kept saying, and even the teachers like, yeah, man, this is like the next GoldenEye. Remember when that was how they would market it?
Yeah.
It's like, and how word of mouth was, oh yeah, this is the best shooter since GoldenEye. And that was enough for me to go, oh, I'll check this out. And we played just a bunch of local multiplayer, and I didn't really get to see a lot of the single player, but played a little bit. And I was like, wow, these graphics are really good for a home console. Because at that time, I had a PS2, we had a Dreamcast, and I had a PC. And I was getting pretty heavy into, like, this is back when you could build a PC before everything got really expensive, but after everything got really cheap, if that makes any sense, when the home building market was just starting, late 90s, early 2000s. So I had a video card that could max out pretty much any game available. And I was like, this looks as good as like my PC games look. And I remember playing that, didn't play Halo 2 or even the single player of 1. Then my brother, later on, we're fast forwarding to when Halo 3 came out. So somewhere between 07 and 09, my brother got his 360. And we had sort of come to terms with like, hey, because we're going to be fighting over games, we would each get our own system. And then if we wanted to trade, we would trade a system for a day or a weekend or whatever. So my thing was I had the PS2, and then eventually I had the PS3, and he got himself a 360, and then eventually we both split on a Wii, because that way we could leave that in like the living room for everybody. But I remember hearing him. He played through the first 3 games, and he was like, "These are so great. They're shooting." And he was one of those kids that was super into the multiplayer of Halo 3. He wasn't a trash. Like, it's funny. He wasn't a trash talker. He's like, yeah, I don't like talking on mic. I'm like, and even back then, he's like, yeah, people are morons. I just like playing with my friends. But he kept telling me, he's like, yeah, the story's really good. You'd like it. And I had never gotten around to playing it. I played a little bit of Halo 1 on his system, and what it was I got stuck. I think it was one of the first or second missions. I think it's where you get introduced to the Flood, without going into details, because we'll go into that later. And I got stuck. Like, I got lost, and I was like, well, I'm done. I'm not going to play this probably ever again. That's how I treated it in 2008 or whatever. And then the lore kept building, and the hype kept building for the game. And I was just not an Xbox person. I didn't own an Xbox.
You made me remember something. Ask me about Radio Lab and Halo 3 when you're done this.
Okay, I'll finish this up, and then I'll ask you about that. So I was that guy that when I was working a job where I could save up enough money, I got a 360 for the singular purpose of playing Mass Effect and Mass Effect 2. And then I still didn't play Halo. I owned it. It came with my system. I just never played it. So it's weird. It's like, it was like nagging at me. Eventually I was going to play it. And then when I finally, years fast forward, we're now working together, and you're telling me, man, you should really play Halo. You should really play Halo. I'm like, yeah, okay. And I think, what did I pick up first? I played a little Halo Wars. And I was like, oh, this is like a prequel sort of. I should start playing this. And I played a little bit, and then I got distracted with other stuff we were doing for the show. And then we ended up playing together. We played Reach, and then we played most of Halo 1 together before we had to work on different projects. And then I blasted through every single game in the Halo franchise, minus the Halo Wars games, all in a 2-week span.
Wow.
In preparation for Infinite. So, like, the lore, it's some of it's a bit of a blur, but it is all in my head, and I was like, you know what? I get it. I have my opinions on how it all works and how it is. Like, I think the main reason why I didn't have as close a connection as some other people did is I'm primarily a single player gamer, and all I ever heard hype for with these growing up was the multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if in the early 2000s, if there had been a focus in the marketing on how good the single player was, I might have picked it up and actually gone with it more than I did. So I feel like and I feel almost now, as we've got this, 20 years of lore, it's starting to open up avenues for more people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
sure.
And yes, so you asked me that's my history with it, is that I am the roundabout fan, where it's like, I had like dipped my toes in it 20 years ago, and then all of it at once, and then I jumped in the deep end in the last 4 months.
So, you know how I was mentioning I went to the launch for Halo 3?
Yes.
So I got interviewed on CBC Radio for
Okay.
Halo 3. I got interviewed the night before, and on launch day, I conveniently called in sick to my radio lab.
Wait, okay. And did they hear you?
Yep. My teacher called me, Mike, I know you live close. Come into my office. And I'm thinking, oh shit, what did I do?
Dude, that's the equivalent of somebody being like, I'm sick for work, and then they're filming something happening on the news, and they find you at a bar.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened. So I walked into my radio teacher's office, Ron. He's like, Mike, pretty sure I heard you on CBC radio this morning. You care to tell me about Halo 3? I'm sorry, sir.
That was a pre-recording.
I was so embarrassed.
Oh man. But again, it's not something he wouldn't have heard before.
Yeah.
Being in the industry that long.
But yeah, I found that so incredible that the people were skipping work for this. And it's weird because I'm kind of like you. I'm a single player gamer, although the first game I ever played on Xbox Live was Halo 2. I played that, and I played Star Wars Battlefront, Battlefronts 1 and 2 on there a lot, but I played a lot of Halo 2. I was never part of a clan, which is a big thing back in the day, not so much now. I met some very interesting people on there, got some very interesting messages, some nice, some not so nice. I really got into the multiplayer with Halo 4 because you could choose your starting loadout for guns. So instead of taking the assault rifle, which is one of my favorite guns in the franchise, I chose the DMR. The DMR is the designated marksman rifle. So I could sit across the map and plink you because that weapon could crack shields really, really easy, and then it's one shot to the head and dead. So my strategy was start with my rifle, make the most of it, or get me in a Ghost, which is essentially the Covenant's motorcycle. It's the best way to kind of think about it. And I would run people over the entire match. And my wife, Blair, would get so happy because I would get splatter kill, vehicular manslaughter, and all these awards just for running people over, because nobody... The thing about Halo, when it comes to the games, is they have their own unique physics to them. And
yeah,
if you know,
they feel different from pretty much any other in the genre.
Yeah, like Bungie era and 343 has kind of got it down. Their physics feel floaty, and that's kind of okay depending on what you're doing. I figured out the physics for the Ghosts. They have been tweaked game to game, but they're very, very, very similar. I can drift with that thing. If I get that in a Halo match, pretty much from 2 all the way up to Infinite, I'm probably going to end up wrecking you, only because I know how to drift and when to boost.
I can probably attribute some of that to the era that it came out, right? Like it's not a lot of shooters are still coming out. Like you've got your distinct ones like your Call of Duties that come out too, but it's from the era of the floatier style of physics, like you see in like the Unreal Tournament games or Tribes, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's almost like they took the best elements of those and made that into their game, and then they've tweaked the engine as we go along, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like if Halo had come out 10 years later, like if the series had started in 2009, 2010, 2011 somewhere, it would be a very different feeling game. It's just that we're lucky that the games were successful and very well made, so that they went through these iterations and still retain something of an early 2000s feel, even in the modern day.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think set Halo apart is it was a shooter that had a story that you actually wanted to know more about. And obviously that started with the first one, Combat Evolved. And we don't need to recap the entire storyline for you, but long story short, there's a human war happening, and there are these soldiers called Spartans, and they were created initially to fight human insurrectionists. And then we ran into a bunch of alien races known as the Covenant. They don't like us very much, so much so we are an affront to their gods. They declare holy war on us, and they wipe out human colonies, beginning with a place called Harvest. It doesn't go well, and humans are continuously being pushed back, but these soldiers created by Dr. Catherine Halsey, who is the model for Cortana, who is a shipboard AI, says, look, these things are what you need to fight this war now. And there's a thing in the Halo lore where Spartans are never killed. They're always just considered MIA, or missing in action. And they became these mythical super soldiers that were capable of defeating the Covenant on their own terms. And we've seen this depicted in various media, which we'll talk a little bit about later here. And then, so basically what happens is there is an invasion of the planet Reach. Reach is supposed to be a planet where there might be insurrection activity, but it's also where Catherine Halsey is holed up with Oni, and she's doing experiments at Castle Base and Sword Base. And then the Covenant show up in force. Like, we're talking overwhelming force. They start to glass the planet. And by glassing the planet, I mean giant orbital space lasers that turn everything to glass.
Basically, you melt all the rock into glass.
Yeah, so it doesn't go well for us. So they're trying to evacuate as many people as possible, stop the Covenant if we can, but at some point it becomes hopeless. So you take the role of Noble 6, who is another, I think they're a Spartan 3. And
which let's pause for a second to explain the differences for anybody listening. Also, I want to mention the initial Halo 1 in itself, the initial lore, very similar to Starship Troopers.
Yeah, it very much influenced
and I'm
that
not
and Aliens.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily talking the costume design a little bit like the movie, much more like the original book is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
How there are soldiers, Marines, you're basically being trained to wear these suits to fight other humans in wars, and then a conflict arises where, like, it's, yes, you could say that, oh, there's other stories like that, but in particular, there you could see that they took a lot of cues from the Heinlein book.
Yeah. So where were they? Oh yeah. So to talk about the different Spartan programs. So Spartan 2s were really the first ones that were successful. They kidnapped like 100 kids. Not many survived. You got kidnapped at age 6. They would replace you with a Flash clone that's identical to you in every way. Except these clones didn't live very long. So Catherine Halsey pioneered this program because people would ask questions if a bunch of kids start going missing. But you can't ask questions if nobody went missing. So they train these kids every day from morning till night to be soldiers. They do every harsh imaginable drill you can think of, and they train them. And eventually at some point they become augmented and genetically modified.
Think of the training from Full Metal Jacket, only they're 6.
Yeah. And then even if you pass the training, if you survive, you may not survive the augmentation program where they put titanium into your bones. They accelerate how fast you heal and stuff like that. Not everybody lived through that. So that's the Spartan 2. Spartan 3s, they took the proof of concept from the Spartan 2 programs and were able to take war orphans and people who were young and abandoned, and they could do the same thing, train them, but it was less expensive, less costly. So they're not as good as Spartan 2s.
And they're also, from what I've seen, correct me if I'm wrong, they're also not quite as tall or as strong.
Yeah, because they're just typical kids. They haven't gone through as extensive modification as Spartan 2s.
Yeah, like the idea was they modified them before they hit puberty and then just completely changed their genetic structure.
Yeah,
whereas with the modern ones, they're more like where Spartan 2s are full on super soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
These are just like the cream of the crop regular humans with some enhancements.
Yeah. And then Spartan 4s are people from other branches of the military. So people like Commander Palmer, like Buck from ODST, and Spartan Locke, those are all Spartan 4s. So, and those are the current ones that are that most people will play as in the games now. Like you're a Spartan 4, you got trained on, I can't remember the name of the space station. But anyway, so
yeah, basically they made a whole bunch of Spartans with the chief among them. Most died very early on.
Yeah.
Even though they were super strong, it was at a time when there was overwhelming odds against them.
Yeah, and you might think, well, wouldn't their shields and armor protect them? Well, that's a technology we stole from the Covenant, because one of the Chief's best friends, and from now on we'll call him Chief or John, one of John's best friends was a Spartan named Sam. Sam got shot with a plasma pistol. It pierced his armor, and he's like, oh, don't worry, we can just kind of biofoam that up, no problem. But they were in space, and for them to get back to their ship, he would die the second he hit vacuum. So Sam's like, well, you guys got to go back home. I'm going to stay here.
So are we going to explain where that lore comes from, or how should we break this down? We're doing games first, and then
yeah, we'll do games first. So to talk about the games, like I said, we're on Reach now. Reach falls, but one of the last human ships, the Pillar of Autumn, escapes with one of the last Spartan 2s. That's you. That's John 117. So Noble 6 dies in a very spectacular fashion. They go down swinging. And Halo Combat Evolved happens, where basically the Pillar of Autumn is doing random slip space jumps. The Covenant cannot find Earth. They don't know where it is yet. There's something called the Cole Protocol, I think it is. And that's basically jump, run, never go home. So they find this giant floating space platform that has an environment on it, and it looks like, well, a giant ring world. They called it Halo. So they land on this thing, and they discover that there's life there. And the Covenant know of these things. They call them the Holy Rings, and it's supposed to help them ascend to something called the Great Journey. The Covenant are very steeped in mysticism and religion, and they use that against people as well, but I'll get to that.
It's very Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, like they
join us or die, and if we determine that you aren't godly, you must die anyway.
Yeah, like they're very racist would be a very good way to describe.
And xenophobic, and any religion that isn't theirs is a false god, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So when they arrive on Halo, it's found out that to the humans, touching it is very, very, very bad. A new Covenant human war begins. But it turns out the Halos also hold a secret on them. They were built by a race of beings called the Forerunners. And it's part of this huge galactic network of Halos that when they fire, they kill every bit of sentient life in the galaxy. And you might be thinking, well, that's a little bit overkill. Yes and no, because hidden upon Halo, I think it's installation 04, where we currently are, is something known as the Flood. The Flood is a parasitic infection that survives by eating and infecting sentient beings. And about 100,000 years beforehand, the Forerunners were in a war with the Flood. It wasn't going well, so they created their final solution. They created the Halo Array. And the Halo array, like I said, kills the Flood by killing their food. However, the Forerunners had the forethought, thank God, to reseed the galaxy with life when they were gone. So they had these things upon their ships that had samples of the Covenant, had samples of humanity, and all the other species in the galaxy.
Of proto-humans. So like
Yeah.
Homo, like if you're
Like
wondering
cavemen sort of thing.
like what happened to Homo erectus? They just disappeared, and when we came back, there was Homo
Neanderthal or something?
Yeah, the Neanderthals, and we're Homo sapiens. Where is that missing link? Well, the missing link is described as, well, they were all wiped out, and when we came back, we were slightly genetically modified.
Yeah, so we are now known as reclaimers.
Yeah, we filled the gap. Like they're like, oh, there's this gap in evolution, and it's like it's like we just jumped into place. It's like it's that they made up for the time that we lost on evolving by like putting us at this point, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because this isn't the first time humanity has existed. It's just this is the second time we've gone into space. We just don't know it. So very, very, very cool. So Halo 1 basically is the fight against the Flood to stop Halo from firing. So because the Covenant want to use the ring because they think it's the right thing to do to start the holy journey.
They are ignorant in their vast technology. They actually don't understand how most of their technology works. They just use it.
Mm-hmm.
They stumble across technology, conquer, take it, don't really understand how it works, find Forerunner technology, and just assume it's of the gods. So because it's of the gods, they're not allowed to figure out how it works because that would be
against holy doctrine
and an affront to their god. Why should you question how gods work? So they don't even understand what the Halo is going to do. They just assume, and because their leaders assume it's true, it must be true, that using it will allow them to transcend to another plane of existence, to live amongst their gods as living gods. Not even though with our technology and especially since we've developed AI technology, which is something that the Covenant doesn't have, but is something that the Forerunners did, we're a little closer on heel to them, if not in firepower and ship technology, just in the computational intelligence technology, right? Like,
yeah,
we're ahead of them when it comes to computations and just analysis. So we figure out what it's going to be, and it's like, oh, this is not just a death laser, it's a irradiating beam of light that will eradicate all sentient life. And if we wanted to tell the Covenant, they would just say that's heresy, you're lying.
Yeah, like there's even a fantastic level in Combat Evolved called the gun pointed at the head of the universe. And that's essentially what it is. So obviously Master Chief and Cortana defeat the Flood. They defeat Halo by blowing it up, by blowing up the Pillar of Autumn's slip space engine, and Halo shatters. And they are left in space floating for a little while, but that's where some of the novels pick in, and we'll talk about that later. Then Halo 2 picks up. He's back on Earth. He's getting commended with Sergeant Johnson, who was not dead.
And this is where the story gets really good, because the story in the first one it's pretty standard sci-fi fare. This is where it really brings itself up above almost all of its peers of its era.
Yeah, like it really fleshes things out. So the Chief is getting decorated with Sergeant Johnson. The Covenant have found Earth. Shit. And the reason that's important is because the Covenant, the fleet that annihilated Reach was way bigger. The Covenant weren't expecting to find us here. And it turns out they're looking for something on Earth that will help them do something with Halo. And that ties into New Mombasa and whatnot, which is where they find holy artifacts on Earth related to the Forerunners. But the thing about Halo 2 that really stuck out to me, it made some people mad at the time because much like Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, you weren't always playing as the Chief. They let you play an elite known as the Arbiter, somebody who failed to kill the Master Chief on Installation 04. And basically the Arbiter is a title of shame, where if you want to make right in this life, you will never join us on the great journey, but you can at least be redeemed here. Serve the will of the prophet of truth, mercy, and regret, I think are the three prophet names. and the Arbiter finds out from another elite leader who's went rogue that the Halos, as you mentioned, Alex, are a lie. They're a giant bad frigging thing for everybody. The prophets have been lying to you. They're controlling us. And there's a civil war that breaks out between a new species that's introduced in Halo 2, the Brutes. So basically big monkeys.
Yeah, giant apes, like almost like Yeti looking dudes.
Yeah, so these Brutes take over from the elites as the chosen honor guard of the Covenant, and that makes a lot of elites mad. And the Arbiter,
they're also a lot less intelligent, but more
strong,
and not as in like they're not complete dummies, but they blindly obey.
Yeah.
Whereas at this point, it's showing that the elites are a little more cunning and a little more inquisitive than the prophets would like.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as the Arbiter starts to discover, like the Arbiter finds ruins and discovers some lore that, like, wait a minute, the Arbiter wasn't a title of shame originally. And
yeah,
he's like,
it was...
what? It's like, that was the title given to our greatest leaders.
Yep.
and you're revealed. It's like, wait a minute, there were leaders of this. Like, you weren't just one species, one planet. It's like, no. And then you start to realize as the player and as the Arbiter that, hey, his people were conquered too.
Yeah, like there's so much stuff layered in, and now I'm leaving a lot out of Halo 2 because there's stuff I really want people to experience.
Yes, of course.
And then Halo 3 is the conclusion of the Covenant War, where the Chief finally gets to put an end to the Flood, and the war with the Covenant comes to an end. And Halo 3 was always billed as finish the fight. And
it's interesting how it's not just, the Earth forces versus the Covenant. It becomes the Earth and the elites versus.
Yeah, so the elites join up with the UNSC. They start helping us. And, eventually we want to free the homeworld of San Helios, which we'll revisit in Halo 5, I think it is.
Yes.
And you defeat the Flood. They're trapped on High Charity. They've been mostly wiped out from the Ark, which is where the Halos are built. It's from a place outside the galaxy. But as the Chief and the Arbiter are getting away on the Forward Unto Dawn, which is the ship that is one of the few UNSC frigates left, the ship gets cut in half. And the Arbiter makes it back to Earth. And he memorializes the Chief. And he's like, I'm sorry your friend's gone, but you have an ally in us. And the Chief puts himself in the cryosleep with Cortana, and he tells her, wake me when you need me. And a lot of us just assumed, well, that's it. And then we got Halo 3 ODST, which is my favorite game in the series, because you're not a Spartan. You're an ordinary soul. You are an orbital drop shock trooper, which basically means you fill these little coffins that the Chief dropped in Halo 2 when he hits the ring. They drop in behind enemy lines. They secure positions and landing zones.
You're basically Green Berets if you were also, like, in a Suicide Squad.
Yeah, basically. And with these guys, so you were originally sent to go take out one of the prophets, but then the mission changes and you have to go to New Mombasa and you're to capture something else. And as that game goes on, it's revealed that not all the Covenant buy it. So there's a new species in the Covenant known as engineers, and one of them wants to defect. And it's an incredibly good story. It's got Nathan Fillion, who you may know from Firefly and Castle, The Rookie, stuff like that. And it's a really, really, really good story. And it has one of the best scores in the series, which we'll talk about in just a minute too. It
shows that the aliens are not just some monolithic evil, like there's more depth to them as the games go on.
Yeah, like not everybody in the Covenant blindly follows, and that gets expanded upon definitely in Infinite and Halo.
They do publicly.
Mm-hmm.
For fear and show of face, but in reality, most of the species that are of a higher intelligence don't just blindly follow. They start to question things. especially when, they've been taught, and for thousands of years, they were unstoppable. Didn't matter. Like every species they came across, they come across the humans, and for their beliefs start to fall apart when they don't just immediately win like they always have. In fact, they start to lose major, major battles, and they're like, and the leaders are like, "Oh, it's all part of God's plan. This heresy can't go." Like the leaders stop being able to make up excuses.
Yeah,
And they're like, "Well, wait, if you've been lying to us about how powerful we are, and these aliens are beating us at every move, is our God right, or is there even our God?" Like they start to really question that, and then that dissension is what ultimately leads to our winning. Right? Like,
I wouldn't say we win a lot of engagements. We win important ones.
Yes, right. We win the very important ones. It's almost like every time they do a big speech to say how they're going to exterminate the humans, and then they lose.
Yeah, like when it comes down to the moral victories, we win them, but we lose places like Onyx, we lose places like Reach,
Yes.
we lose Harvest, and things change in the Covenant. So moving forward, the Chief is floating in space. We don't know where he is, and this is the beginning of Halo 4, and it's a Forerunner shield world. It's a planet that's artificially created, and it turns out the Forerunners, maybe not all of them are as good as we think they are. We run into a new bad guy known as the Didact. The Didact was a Forerunner who wanted to be a little bit more aggressive when it came to some of their tactics.
Up to this point, what we have sort of revealed and understood from the lore is that after they wiped out all species to stop the flood, that they killed themselves as part of it and weren't going to come back. They decided not to let themselves come back. They didn't preserve themselves the same way. It turns out that there's some sects of that didn't necessarily believe in that benevolent design and may have lied to the rest of their own people and sort of huddled themselves away in another part of the galaxy.
Yeah, so the Didact has something called the Composer. The Composer can change living beings into something called a Promethean, which is a Forerunner soldier. So anybody who dies can be composed into one of these soldiers, and these were meant to fight the flood, but the Didact's like, I'm not sure I like this idea anymore. So seeing humanity as the new threat, he's like, you know what? I'm still around. Maybe I should be the Reclaimer. But you also meet a friendly Forerunner known as the Librarian, who was the Didact's wife, and she's like, I don't know what I can do to help you. I will protect you, Spartan, John. You are the Reclaimer. So he can't be composed now, but the Didact eventually attacks Earth, and some people get composed, but thankfully, thanks to Cortana and Chief, there's a nuclear weapon. There's a lot I'm leaving out here. But the part about Halo 4 that really got with me, because I don't remember a lot of it, but there are some character moments. It's discovered that human AIs, or AIs from the Halo universe, they don't live very long because they think themselves to death. AIs are built upon, or the good AIs are built upon brains. The brain scans of the individual, they die because they're so deep and penetrating, but an AI can only live for about 7 years. A dumb AI can live indefinitely, like the ones that are in the suits from Halo Infinite. But an AI like Cortana, like Roland, they only survive for about 7 years. So Cortana's going through something called rampancy. She's thinking herself to death. She starts to malfunction. So she saves the Chief at the end of 4, but her time's up, and she saves just enough of herself to say goodbye to the Chief, where she can project herself into hard light. And there's and I didn't expect this out of the Halo franchise. I remember getting teary-eyed when the Chief and her meet physically for the first time, and she touches his armor just above his heart. And she's like, I've waited so long to do this. And the Chief can't look her in the face. And he's like, I was the one who was supposed to take care of you. And Cortana says, and you did. We took care of each other. And she's like, this is goodbye, John. And she sends you back to Earth. You meet up with Commander or Captain Lasky above Earth on the Infinity. And the chief is sort of wondering, well, now what? The war is over. Like, what's peace now? And he's lost his best friend, someone who loved him, and he probably loved her too. And it's something that will come back to haunt him in Halo 5. When Halo 5 picks up, the chief...
Now, did we mention that there's been a time jump in here?
Yeah, about 3 years, I think. 3 or 4 years. Yeah, so Halo 5 picks up. There are now more Spartans. There are now a lot more Spartan 4s. Like Buck has now become one, and there's Fire Team Osiris. The Chief has his own Spartan team. There are other Spartan 2s like Fred, Kelly, and I can't remember the other guy's name. And then the other Spartans, there's Spartan Locke, Buck.
No, I should say
Tanaka.
that this, maybe an unpopular opinion, but this is, outside of the new game, my favorite Halo.
See, that really surprises me. Halo 5 is the one that pissed me off the most.
I like the controls better than all the previous Halos, and I know Bungie fans are going to be like, "Oh my god, how could you say that?" It just feels better. For somebody who played all of them at once, in succession, I didn't have the luxury.
You had the evolution of.
I could, instead of having multiple years between them, where we evolve with it, I can feel the differences significantly. And I actually really like the idea of, they brought back the whole jumping between two perspectives, between missions. I felt that the game could have been longer than it was. But that's what I'll say before we go into the lore. I really liked what they did with it, and I might be alone in that.
5 got different because it's, long story short here, I'm going to skip a lot of this one, is it's discovered that Cortana is still alive. She's survived by going into the Forerunner domain, which is where she was thought at the end of Halo 4. She survived rampancy by entering this computer network of infinite computing power. And she also now has access to Forerunner things called Guardians, which are basically these giant kaiju-like mecha death things that float in space.
It is revealed that not the Forerunners that did the Halo project were actually the benevolent, trying to do their best group. But that's all we had known up to this point. Then we find out, hey, they weren't really that peaceful of a race. They maintained peace through oppression.
Yeah, so Cortana's like, well, maybe you, humanity, aren't the reclaimers. Maybe us, the created, are the reclaimers, because all you want to do is kill each other. So what if I said, I'm going to come to your world, shut down all your technology, and if you don't surrender, I'll kill you.
And it's interesting because what it plays into is that our greatest achievement in everything we've done, war or anything, has been that our artificial intelligence is actually more powerful than the Forerunners.
Yeah, and Cortana turns into a bad guy, and with her, it's the ultimate betrayal of the chief. A lot of people die.
A lot.
And
a lot, because she convinces all the other AIs to go along with her.
Yeah, like there are very few that are left.
So, some stay loyal, but it's very few.
Yeah, like Roland from the Spirit of Fire stays loyal. There's another one, but even the one in control of the new Spartan 4 training facility that's in space, he decides to detonate it, but you don't find that out until Halo.
I think Roland and maybe one other, and that's it.
Serena or something.
I remember hearing only it's like one or two that shut themselves off from her, and they're like, "No, we're staying."
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it. That's it. They made their decision. They stayed, and everybody else is like, "Nah, we're going to join you."
Yeah. So things change radically, and then we get into Halo Infinite, where the status quo of the galaxy has changed a lot. Now, you notice I've left out Halo Wars 1 and 2. I haven't played them enough to give you a complete synopsis of them.
Same with the Spartan one. And Halo Wars 2 has a lot more to do with Infinite than I initially realized when I started doing research for this. Basically, there's a new faction splintered from the Covenant known as the Banished, led by a guy called Atriox. And he doesn't like anybody who isn't him and his followers. So
at the big, I'm not going to summarize Infinite because I still want you guys to play it and experience it. But
Just know
Atriox,
that it has, in my opinion, the best single player campaign outside of Halo 2.
yeah, Halo Infinite is probably my favorite campaign and gameplay outside of Reach for me. Just because of all the different armor abilities and whatnot.
The only reason I don't count Reach is because it's a lot shorter.
Yes. So we've talked a lot about the lore. We've given you sort of a summary of the games if you haven't played up to this far. So we're going to take a small break here on This Week in Geek, and I'm going to throw things over to an author who's worked on several books in the Halo franchise. The one I'm reading now is called Halo New Blood, but he also did Legacy of Onyx, I think was the other one, and he also did Halo Bad Blood as well. He also is a tabletop game designer. He did Shotguns and Sorcery, but he's also worked on a number of other projects over the years. His name is Matt Forbeck. So we're going to take a break, listen to what me and Matt had to say, and when we come back, we are going to talk a little bit more about the media that is now available for the Halo franchise. So we will be back right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Look, maybe a little later, nothing has to happen, we can just hold each other in our underwear. But for now, how about we move? I have enough to worry about without you going all starry-eyed on me.
Don't make me rat you up to HR. You were at the seminar.
Showstopper.
Welcome back to ThisWeekInGeek.net. I'm your host, Spartan Mike 260. And this afternoon, we have some declassified intelligence from the Office of Naval Intelligence. You know them as ONI. And I want to invite our very own ONI operative here on the show. We actually had him on the show many, many, many years back. And I'm talking about author Matthew Forbeck. He's worked on 3 separate Halo novels. He's worked on New Blood, Bad Blood, and Legacy of Onyx, but he's also worked in the tabletop game industry for a number of years across a variety of different projects. One of his most recent ones was Shotguns and Sorcery. So I want to welcome Matt back to the show.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to do this on such short notice, because I've been really getting back into Halo. And one of the things that I'm doing right now is I'm actually taking writing courses through a local community college in creative writing. And that's really got me really thinking about the creative process. And I figured, well, you're an author, you like me, so let's have a conversation, because I wonder what it's like to create in a universe that you yourself didn't have a hand in creating, but now that you've had a chance to explore writing in those worlds with characters like Buck and the rest of Alpha 9, and even Fireteam Osiris from Halo 5 Guardians, what is it like to create with characters that aren't your own, but give them their own personalities? Because, like, for example, in Halo New Blood, I didn't know Buck wanted to be a fisherman at one point.
Yeah. Well, neither did I until I wrote it down. So there you go. I think it's a lot of fun. I mean, writing for other people's properties, or what we call tie-in work or IP work, intellectual property work, can be a lot of fun. For one, you're often working in on a property that you enjoy, right? I mean, if you don't care about it, you probably shouldn't be working on it. And for two, you end up with an audience that's, if not bigger than what you're already doing, which it usually is, at least different than your own audience, right? So it's neat to be able to work out and do these kind of things. I've been a big Halo fan forever, so I honestly kind of sworn off doing tie-in work up until, for a couple of years. And then the guys at Simon & Schuster got the license for doing Halo. And literally, I was writing them because my editor there, I worked with an editor there doing, Ed Schlesinger, doing a novel for Guild Wars 2 when that came out. When it originally came out. And at the time, he's like, yeah, we'll see how we do this. And maybe there's something else we can work on in the future. And when I found out they had Halo, I'm like, oh, you're going to give me one of these books right now, Ed, whatever you do. And he writes me back saying, Matt, I was literally halfway through writing an email to you when your email showed up. So that was perfect. It worked out really well, right? Because I've known Halo since I actually got to visit the Bungie offices when I was interviewing with them for a job working on some kind of a fantasy property back in about 1999, before the game had been announced even. And I remember them taking me around the office, giving me a little tour and showing me the stuff they were working on. I was just gobsmacked back then. But to then have the opportunity several years later, after having played all the games and played them with my kids as well, to be able to write in that universe, I was like, yes, sign me up. This is something I actually like. I care about. I won't have to do hours and hours of research for it because I already know it all. And I'm thrilled to be able to have a chance to do it. So for me, that was a ton of fun. Sometimes it's not as much fun, but for Halo, it was fantastic.
So because you'd already had the kind of research and the familiarity under your belt, the book that I'm reading right now is New Blood, and that mostly involves Alpha 9 and the characters from Halo 3 ODST. What was it like to take those characters, which only got really one game, and kind of sort of Halo 5 to flesh them out? Because Nathan Fillion's character, Buck, is obviously, he is a wise ass. He's creative. He's smart. He's capable. So you have to balance what was written for him in the game originally, but also bring your own unique kind of voice to him. When you created the story for New Blood, what direction were you given from 343 to basically what kind of creative liberties were you allowed to have? Because a lot happens in that book, and I don't want to spoil it for people because I know what happens, and I'm thinking, holy shit.
Yeah, there's a bunch in there, but originally, when, for instance, even going back to the pitch process, they said pitch us some ideas, and when you do the stuff with 343, they'll actually sit down and say, here's one idea for you, maybe two, but come up with like 3, 4 of your own, and then you can lean into whichever ones you want to. And I looked at what they had, and I'm like, okay, here's 5 ideas. And one of them was Halo 3 ODST, doing a sequel to that. And I didn't have any idea that Buck was going to be in Halo 5 at the time. And they said, you know what? That's pretty intriguing. It might play in with some of our future plans. Why don't you pursue that one? And the main reason I did is because I really enjoy Buck's voice, right? I enjoy that whole Nathan Fillion, like you say, sharp-tongued, fun kind of a guy who's, streetwise and, pretty lethal as well. I like that kind of a character, right? And that's kind of a character I'm very comfortable writing. So for me, it was not very much of a stretch to be able to write Buck. I was like, oh, this is great. I already know who he is. I know how to write this, and I can have a ton of fun with it. I mean, Halo 3 ODST owes a lot to noirish film and books, right? It's got that kind of a pattern to it. They do like dark scenes at night in the rain and things like that. You're not the superhero of the Spartans at that point. You're just some regular soldier essentially coming through. So I often liken it like if the Master Chief was Superman, the ODST guys are Batman, right? They don't have quite the same power, but they're just as determined, maybe a little bit smarter. So for me, that was fun to be able to work with that. And the guys at Microsoft said, have some free reign with it. Show us what you want to do. So what you always do with these kind of things is you write an outline to show them where you want to go before you sit down and write a whole book. Because there's nothing worse than writing a whole book and having them say, nah, it wasn't quite what we were looking for. So I did the outline, and they're like, yeah, do this. This is great. This is whatever here. The bits about Buck wanting to be a fisherman, that's just stuff as you're going along and you're writing, you toss in bits of color about the character that become apparent to you that you're learning about as you write the book. And those are some of the bits that actually make for the most fun. It gives the character a lot more depth than you could possibly get in something like a video game or even a movie or a TV series where you don't have nearly as much time to focus on that. And novels are really good at exploring the interior worlds of these characters that, again, when you're playing a video game or watching a TV show or whatever, you're just seeing the surface of them, right? You don't get to get that interior monologues. And to be able to dive into that and get into their thoughts, a novel is a perfect place to do that. I really enjoyed being able to explore that with Buck and all the rest of the characters.
When you started working with these characters, and I said you found their voices, you could explore their inner dialogue, as you were writing, who would you say is the character you were most surprised in developing? Because Alpha 9 is composed of many different characters like Dutch and Romeo and Mickey. When you were going along that process, what character really kind of stood out to you as like, this is really a blank slate and I can really kind of play with this?
Mickey was probably the character I did the most strange stuff with, right? He's got some interesting plot twists that happen around him. But part of that was did a deep dive into Halo lore, and I figured out some bits. I'm like, oh, this is his motivation. This is how he works. This is why he's going to end up being the way he is, right? And so I think he was really the more surprising character to me. Romeo is kind of fun because Romeo is just a jackass, right? So you get to write this guy who's just kind of a douche. In one sense, he is the bad version of Buck, right? He's what Buck would be if Buck didn't have some kind of empathy about him. And so you can see how they could play off each other really well. And they don't really like each other much because of that, right? They're like, yeah, you're like me, except you're wrong. So it was kind of fun to see the interplay with them. And Dare, the woman that Buck ends up with, she was a lot of fun to write too. I mean, getting her voice in my head and developing some more information about her and getting into her backstory really was exciting, I thought.
But say one of the fun things about Halo is it has such a wide variety of characters and motivations and lore to it. And obviously now that you've added your own kind of spin to it, looking across what Bungie has done, and now 343 is carrying the legacy forward with Halo Infinite, looking at everything, what is the thing that you find most interesting? And I'll give you an idea of what I'm asking. By the way, spoilers, guys. So in Infinite, it's revealed that Cortana is regretful for what happened with her takeover using the Guardians and everything. And she needs to leave something behind so the Master Chief can accomplish his mission and save the universe, in essence, from Atriox and Escharum and the Banished. And I find that very kind of beautiful because she realizes what she did was wrong. And it's a very human trait, even though she was, in essence, a created AI from Dr. Halsey's own brain. What character in the lore and just what really stands out to you as something that maybe stands a little bit above video game cliche? Because everybody for many, many years, at least in my friends group, would decry Halo as big, shooty, green space marine guy with gun.
I can understand why people might think that, but I mean, I know the guys who wrote the original Halo Bible way back in the day, and there's a ton of depth and surprising depth behind that. The fact that Halo is actually willing to explore morally gray areas, and they don't do it as much in the video games as they do in the novels and such. Although you see a lot of it in the cutscenes and the text and acting for the video games. And the whole idea that Halsey was hauling 6-year-olds out of their school, their homes, and turning them into Spartans and leaving behind clones that were inevitably going to die and leave these parents grieving for these lost children. That's some pretty dark shit, right? So
yeah.
To be able to, and then you look at that, and you're like, wow, they didn't have to do that kind of stuff to make Halo what it is, to make it just a shooter with a guy in a green suit, right? You could have just tossed any kind of Heinlein type plot on her or whatever and said, it's all Starship Troopers go. But and Starship Troopers got a lot more depth than a lot of people give it to as well, as far as being a critique of that kind of stuff. But the guys who did this really tossed in some dark things there, and it really shows up in some of the novels I read. In fact, in Legacy of Onyx, we really get into the whole, why are these people? These people were created not to fight against aliens, and that shows up in New Blood as well. The Spartans were not created to fight against aliens; they were created to fight against an insurgency within the human space, and then were moved over to fight against aliens. And what happens when the aliens are defeated? What happens when you're not fighting them anymore? What are the Spartans being used for, and what is their purpose at that point? And now we've got new aliens in Halo 5 and in Halo Infinite and everything else that they can fight against. So they're back to that original purpose. But there's that bit there where you're like, well, there's peace in the galaxy. What the hell are we doing? And how does this all work? And how can we reconcile ourselves with our dark beginnings? And I thought that was some pretty deep stuff to wrestle with in the text.
Yeah, because there's one theme throughout New Blood. There's a character that says, I wanted to fight against aliens, and now I'm not doing that. This feels wrong. And you're right. Moral ambiguity in Halo is not something I really thought about. Like, I literally just watched, I watched Forward Unto Dawn and Fall of Reach within the last couple of days. And getting into that headspace of what these kids must have went through, either be it a cadet like kind of Lasky, who really didn't want to be there in the first place, and then you look at someone like John, or even Samuel and Kelly and Linda, I think it is, Blue Team. It's interesting to look at how these people have been shaped by their experiences and the weight of the decisions they've had to make. In fact, it wasn't until today I rewatched a cut scene from Halo Infinite, and the passcode to delete the weapon was Samuel 034.
Yeah.
And that really hit me, because I'm thinking, that's your brother who died, and he stayed behind to make sure you escaped. And it's really kind of heavy stuff to think about. This is a video game, and I come from a fandom of Mass Effect and Persona, games that deal with some very heavy topics. Halo is not one that I expected to dig into like this, and I'm really glad that it did. So, Matt, we're going to end this interview on something a little happier.
Okay.
Because I want to draw upon your experiences as a tabletop game designer. And I'd asked this question on Twitter, not expecting to get a response from you, but if you could design a Halo tabletop RPG game, what would you do?
That's a good question. I think the main thing for a tabletop RPG is to lean into the things that an RPG is good at and avoid the things that it's not good at. Or in this sense, in Halo, I mean, if I don't think the RPG should be about shooting people. I mean, it's got to be obviously be a big part of it, right? The combat and everything else. But I think should be simple and easy, whatever. Because if you want to just go shoot things and have fantastic action, it's really hard to beat the video game at that. So the a Halo role-playing game, I think, should concentrate a little bit more on the intrigue and the diplomacy and the adventures that you maybe don't see directly when you're playing Halo 5 or Halo Infinite or any of the other Halo games, right? The bits, the interstitial bits that connect those battles are some of the most important parts in a role-playing game. And a role-playing game has got a lot more depth to it. You can actually investigate who the characters are, what they're doing, why they're there, what they care about. Those are intriguing bits to actually put into a role-playing game. And then, of course, you have the combats, but the combats should not be the focus of the whole game. If you just want to do combats, it should be either like miniatures, or you should just go play the video game. Because, again, really hard to beat the adrenaline rushes that you get when you're playing Halo and, do that in a tabletop game.
I guess as my final question to you along the same lines, are you surprised that we haven't seen the Halo franchise adapted into a tabletop RPG, given now that we're seeing Power Rangers, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Star Trek, Fallout, all these huge IPs now have a tabletop component to it? Why have we not seen this yet?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that can happen. One is that, a lot of these new things are happening more recently, right? A lot of the bigger licenses are happening more recently. I mean, some of those, like Star Trek, we've had role-playing games for 30, 40 years now, right? Going all the way back to like Starfleet Battles, if you want to get into that stuff, which is less of a role-playing game, more of a tabletop miniatures game. But I think part of the reason is that, for licensors, and I've seen this in the past, handling a role-playing game is a lot of effort, right? And the guys at 343 really do a fantastic job of making sure that everything they do is of quality when they do these things, right? They don't just throw out licenses and, let anybody do whatever the hell they want. They actually pay attention to these. When I was working with them on the novels, the amount of detail that they paid to everything was incredible. And they always kept me on track with everything. And the love that they had for it shone through in everything that they did. So for them to go, and a novel's a pretty intricate thing as well. But then to say, okay, we're going to do a role-playing game that requires everybody's attention and requires all this detail in it as well, and fact-checking and everything else, that's a lot more than saying, hey, these people want to license T-shirts or Nerf weapons or whatever else, right? So it's a lot more effort on their part to actually be able to pull that off. That doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means that somebody has to show up with the right plan and say, hey, guys, this is something I really want to work on, and I think they could do it. A lot of people in the video game industry now are also tabletop game players. So I'm sure there are plenty of those within 343. And a lot of us go back and forth. I mean, you'd be surprised maybe, or maybe you wouldn't be, about how many game designers and game writers both work in the tabletop industry and in the video game industry. because there's just so much fun to have in either way.
I was about to say, yeah, because I understand you're directing voiceover for a project you can't even say anything about right now.
Yeah, it hasn't been announced yet, but when it is announced, I'll be happy to do it. Currently, I'm working on 2 tabletop projects, which are the Shotguns and Sorcery thing, and I'm the lead writer on the new Marvel role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game being published by Marvel Comics. And I'm working on 3 video games, only one of which has been announced, and that's the Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus mobile game being done by Snowprint Studios. And the other 2 haven't been announced yet, so I can't say anything about them until they are.
Well, we'll definitely be sure to have you back to talk about those in the future. So, Matt, thank you so much for taking time out of your absurdly busy schedule to speak with us today here at This Week in Geek.
Thanks for having me. I always appreciate it.
All right, guys, we're going to throw things back to me and my AI buddy, Alex, the producer. We will be back right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
ONI officers know 100 ways to kill a man. But for you, I'll make it 101.
Snipe! Thank you very much to author Matt Forbeck for doing that interview with us. So there's a lot of stuff we left out of our summary of Halo, just kind of giving it the human perspective, because there are some plot points that I think are really worth experiencing on your own for the first time, because there's some revelations. So one of the things I talked about with Matt during that interview is you look at the human cost and the morality of war in Halo, and it's something I don't know. It's something I often heard associated with Halo is just big green space marine shooty guy and go kill the bad aliens. But when I started watching some of the media, when I started reading some of the lore, especially Matt's book, New Blood, I started thinking about Halo in an entirely different perspective, because like it's been established, and we talked about in the beginning of the show, the Spartan 2s were designed to fight humans. That's kind of messed up.
Yeah, what they're showing is our government, while technically unified, it's a very, very... Remember Space Above and Beyond?
Yep.
How...
or Gundam?
Space Above and Beyond, Earth went to... Yeah, Gundam too, but Earth went to war with Mars.
Mm-hmm.
and like the moon and places, because anybody that wasn't on Earth was being treated like a second-class citizen.
Yep.
That's pretty much what it was, and they demonized anybody that wasn't on Earth, because if you weren't on Earth, you're out of sight, out of mind. They could say whatever they wanted about you, and the reality was, they wanted like proper treatment when they're working in the mines. They didn't want to be like
exploited
and cannon fodder, and they didn't want to be taxed to death, but they were demonized by the government, because the government realizes that to keep they're very militaristic in that if we keep ourselves unified against an outside force, nobody will question us.
Yeah, like having a colony that's years away from Earth via slip space travel or whatever. Why does Earth care what I do on Moon 4, 5, whatever? They shouldn't have any say. And I get why a lot of Halo people in that universe would separate and rebel against the UNSC. I get that. I really do.
Yeah,
especially since I'm native. That's I get that.
It's paralleling certain colonization thing. Like obviously they're drawing upon history of Earth to do the future. And the main difference between Halo and something like a Starship Troopers or one of these others is when we are actually encountering the alien force, it isn't just a unified like, oh, there's the new bad guy we got to kill. It actually kind of snaps our government out of it a little bit. Yes, we're all unified. Yes, we're all going to fight. Yes, it's rah, 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 military, go, go, go. But you get the idea that the government has changed enough that once this war is over, we might not resort to what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
Because enough damage was done to us that it might have finally snapped us out of our warring territorial minds.
And yet, when the post-Covenant War stuff happens, we go right back to it, because the Spartan program is like, well, now that all the aliens are defeated, now what do we do? and inevitably insurrectionists and rebels come back again, and we see that play out in some of the expanded universe stuff.
Exactly. So it isn't purely this, but what it shows is that it's a hard habit to break, but that there are people that want to change it.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at the moral gray area of what Dr. Halsey did, sure, it ultimately saved humanity, but at what cost? Because one of the things that happens in this world is there are child soldiers, and this happens over in other nations in like Europe, in Africa, and it's obviously a very, very, very bad thing. And that's something else to consider too. You're robbing these kids and you're robbing families, and yet Halsey, I wouldn't say she does it with a smile because there's a purpose behind it, but it's dark. It's a lot darker than
it's something that
expected.
Ultimately didn't. Here's the Spartans didn't need to exist.
Yeah, it was something that, sure, diplomacy probably wasn't going to work out, but it's nothing a couple of ODST companies and some Marines and some Scorpion tanks couldn't have accomplished.
Yeah, and from what we've seen in all the lore and the expanded stuff, there wasn't ever an attempt to actually negotiate.
Yeah, it's just sort of like it's our way or the highway, deal with it. And not everybody liked it, and that's the cost of war, and that's why all these humans are like, you can't do this, and I get it, I do. And then to look at other things, to look at the nature of artificial intelligence and artificial life, because that's something we're dealing with now as a species. As computers become more intelligent, I'm very much a futurist in that regard. I do believe firmly we will have fully sentient, capable AI. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime, but I do predict we will come a day when we hear a computer say, I think, therefore I am.
And just hope it's not Mass Effect style where the first thing it says is, does this one have a soul?
Well, and that's something else too.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous territory, because if you're not prepared to answer it.
Yeah, because you think about people like Cortana, and she displays a genuine love for John, and that's very human.
There is also, like, I've talked to you off air before, and I'm like, I'm a little confused by this. There is some very Freudian stuff involved with her, because isn't her cortex like
based on Halsey?
Halsey, who treats John like a son, and and it's like a mother-daughter, but also like pseudo attracted nature, because they're not really the same person, but they are the same person.
Yeah, it's weird.
They have this. Then the question arises: does Cortana have her own soul, or is her soul a variation of Halsey's soul?
I would say she has her own, because her experiences shape her through everything, and even when some very big plot moments happen in Infinite, that's all I'm going to say about it. There's a very interesting arc with Cortana.
Oh, absolutely. Just, it does bring up a lot of questions that I'm like, ooh, this goes a little deeper than I think a lot of people will read into it. But they're like, it's a weird dynamic between those three people.
Yeah, like there's so much. If you're willing to explore some of the expanded universe, and that's what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about some of the expanded media. There's now movies. There's now Forward Unto Dawn, Fall of Reach, which tells the story of John and the other Spartans. There is Halo Nightfall, which is a live-action movie that was released on Xbox Live and some other places. And there is the Halo shorts. There was Landfall, the commercial for ODST, and I want to say there was one more thing. And Legends, which was an anime project, which also adds to the lore and kind of fleshes things out. Actually, I've got a story for Halo Legends. So I was living in Hamilton at the time, and Microsoft Canada, I think it was either Microsoft or Warner Brothers, I'm not sure which, contacted me on a Thursday, and they called me and they're like, hey, Mike, can you be home tomorrow morning? I was in college and Friday happened to be my day off. So I'm like, yeah, I'll be home. Why? You need to be home between 11 and 12. You have to sign for something. Okay, that's awfully specific, but yeah, sure. So I stay home and a guy comes to my door in a Halo hoodie and hands me a pizza and an action figure and a copy of Halo Legends. So I had a Halo Legends pizza box in my closet for years. And it was just so unusual. I've never received a press kit like that.
Was it done through like Domino's or Pizza or somebody?
I think it was a Domino's pizza, or yeah, I'm almost maybe Pizza. I'm not sure.
Because if it was a Canada only thing, I could see Pizza being the national brand. But if it was something they had done in the States too, it probably would have been Domino's. Like, I don't remember Pizza Hut ever having a deal with them.
Yeah, like it was just cool though that.
So they sponsored a media pizza party for you.
Yeah, so I remember watching this with like Dave and I think it was Stefan or Pierce.
Because that was 2010, I think, when the Legends came out.
Yeah, 2010 or 2011. Yeah, it must have been 2010. So I watched it and I just thought that was really, really, really cool. But the thing that really made me pay attention to Halo tied into ODST, where they did like a 2.5 minute commercial and you see a guy come up through basic training, getting his head shaved, fighting a brute, and somebody dying on the field. And one of my favorite shots, I use it a lot on Twitter actually, it's the shot of their SMG in the ground barrel first, a shattered ODST visor on a helmet, and I guess the leader of the platoon takes the ODST flag that a regiment would carry, puts it behind his armor, pulls down his helmet, and then the visor comes down and it's all blue. And I've just never forgot that. There was also commercials for Halo 3, which were done in sort of a war memorial type thing, kind of like you'd see from the Legion, or these moments in Canada were like a part of our like kind of heritage moments.
Oh, the heritage moments. Okay, yeah.
So they talk about the chief and this older soldier who fought with the chief at the Battle of New Mombasa, and he's remembering him. And I've just got to thinking, man, this is what Halo could look like. And then I remember when the leaked shots of the Warthog came out, which was used in, I think, Halo Landfall. And I'm like, oh my God, they made it look cool. And then we got Forward Unto Dawn, which I didn't see until after I met Daniel Cudmore. And the Marine armor was very reminiscent of Halo 3 and 4. Or Reach, I can't remember. I think it was closer to Reach, honestly. But
I'll say this, out of all the media that we did, I watched for research for this, all the home videos and everything, this was probably the best produced.
Yeah, Forward Unto Dawn felt like a legitimate TV pilot.
Yeah,
something
like a TV movie that could have led into a series.
Yeah, and they had the weapons down, they had the armor down, and when the chief appears finally, he looks really good. Even the creatures you see in it, you see an elite, a Kigyar, a hunter, and you see other Spartans.
What year was it? Was it 2012? I think.
I think so. That sounds about right.
Because I know it was one of the earlier ones. Yeah. I think Legends came first, and then this came out, or they're right around the same time of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, like, what I liked about it was, again, this didn't have to be a Halo property initially. Like, when you're watching it, it could have been any sci-fi thing, right? When they're getting trained at first, until you see the helmets. And I like the little bit that they're trickling in, like when you're trying to figure out what time this was, like when is this happening in the timeline? And this is when they're being trained to fight the rebels, to fight the humans.
Yeah,
the Covenant hasn't been, like, they might have had a few skirmishes
at Harvest or something like that,
but they had not. It was not known to anybody else yet.
Yeah, exactly. It was very hush hush.
And that one, the one cadet has been hacking into the government servers and has been piecing together live on the ground fights because he's obsessed with it. He wants to see, them kill the bad guys. And after he pieces together the last piece, they're like, what the hell is that? And they see a Spartan. The Spartans weren't even known to the regular public. He's like, what is that? That thing's like 7 feet tall, and it's actually a Spartan. And then they're like, no, it gets better. Look at this. And then they see an elite.
Yeah, they're like, what the hell
like,
does it have?
That's at this point, humans have not made contact with any sentient life. There might have been life on planets they went to, but nothing sentient.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what the hell? And then he's called to the office. Essentially, he's like, oh, I'm in trouble. And boom, this is when the coordinated attacks against all of the military training bases are happening.
Yeah, and it didn't have to be as respectful to the lore as it needed to be, but you see them use appropriate weaponry. You see the armor. I think the Chief's armor may be a little bit more advanced in the timeline than when it should be, but whatever.
Yeah, I have a question for you, since you're a little more of the lore master than me.
Mm-hmm.
So this is obviously happening
around Harvest.
Yeah, around Harvest. This is before the fall of Reach.
Yes.
So this might explain where the Chief was during Reach.
No, the Chief was on Reach. He wasn't. I think he was fighting, but I don't think he was the main person, because I know he was on board the Pillar of Autumn, because obviously you had to deliver
right.
Cortana. Yeah.
Okay, that's right. That's how my brain works. Okay, so that's right. So this may be one of the few missions beforehand.
Yeah, so this is him with his original team of Fred and Kelly from Blue Team on, like, this is one of the first missions, and it turns out these kids from this planet are some of the only ones left. There's like 4 survivors, maybe 3.
Yeah, there's 4 at the beginning that survive, and then at the end, we're left with just a
2.
couple.
Yeah, so it's pretty brutal, and one of the kids asks one of the Spartans, like, how old are you? And one of the Spartans, Kelly, I think it's 087 is her designation. She takes off her helmet. She's a 14-year-old girl. And the other kid, Fred, takes off his helmet. 104 is, I think, his thing. And again, a kid. The Chief doesn't take his helmet off, but John would be about the same age.
Yeah, because they're taken when they're 6. And this is after watching all the other specials in Halo Legends Origins 1 and 2, the first 2 10-minute episodes. It not there. It was the
Fall of Reach.
The Fall of Reach cartoon showcased how they became to be who they were. That's where you had mentioned that one of their team members dies on their first mission.
Sam, yeah.
And I speculated it's probably true that after that, Chief doesn't take his helmet off again.
Yeah, because
and it's because he and all the others started crying.
Yeah, that's very heavily implied. In fact,
that he doesn't want to take it off till the fight is over, and so that would place the movie at either the second or third mission right after.
Yeah. Now, there's a fun little Easter egg in Halo Infinite, which I think you'll probably recognize now. Do you remember, Alex, at a very specific plot moment in Infinite where Chief has to enter codes, and the code is Samuel's 034?
Oh, yeah.
That's why, because that was his best friend who died. And that, seeing all the Halo...
Oh, yeah, because even in the previous, in the cartoon, that's the kid that they get in a fight over because the Chief or John says, why are we being punished? I won. And then he was the kid that was like, thanks for nothing.
Yeah.
Because they were supposed to work as a team. So, and after that, they were always together in training.
Yeah, and it's something when you watch all the Halo media so rapid fire like me and Alex have done for the past couple of weeks, everything takes on a whole dimension now. And it's kind of incredible that they've kind of done this.
Yeah, it's not so far sparse. Like, you see things in Final Fantasy or in other games where people are like, oh, you've just got to read this website and go ahead. No. This is held together. You can get 99% of the lore within the 3 or 4 movies.
Yeah,
and they're not super long. Like, when I say movies, some of them, they're like 70 minutes long total.
Mm-hmm. Like, when Bungie passed the torch to 343 and things started expanding out into comics, other video games and movies and other expanded media, I really felt like the lore grew 10 times, and I liked its complexity and depth. If you don't read the novels, you're not missing out too much. I will recommend the Forbeck novels, specifically if you like ODST. There's a lot in there you're going to want to read.
So basically, it fills in that group where if you're
Alpha
playing,
9, yeah.
So if you're playing ODST and you're playing, Halo 4 and 5, where you're like, I wonder what, there's an entire aspect of the human forces that you don't really get to see a ton of.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't realize this until today. I was watching Halo Legends. Dutch is in the ODST one called The Babysitter. And I heard the name Dutch, and I'm listening to the voice. I'm like, is that the same character? So I looked it up. That's Dutch.
Yeah. So I guess we'll say Forward Unto Dawn is, what happens.
Really good. Totally.
Basically, it's what's taking place when there hasn't just been a couple fights. Like there's been a couple fights with the Covenant unofficially. This is when they declare war.
Yeah.
And like the first war with them, like when it's starting, before they go completely nuts when we find the Halo.
Mm-hmm.
And then other movies, we've mentioned the Fall of Reach, which I thought was going to be about Reach, but has really nothing to do with Reach.
They just come back to Reach after it's fallen, and that's it.
Yeah, the ending. It basically starts out with them doing training missions. Here's the history of the Spartan program. Here's what happened on their first mission, and then it ends with Reach is over. We're about to get into what's happening with Halo 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And might be leading into the mission that happens into Forward Unto Dawn. And then you have the Legends anime, which a couple of them I didn't care for the animation styles. The one that was all the lore with the Elite, the paintbrush watercolor one, I had a hard time making out what was happening because it was so blurry. And it's not. It wasn't the video quality; it was the animation style. So it wasn't for me. But it was a neat story.
Yeah.
The first two there, Origins, are
essential.
Essential because they set up the history of our universe, unlike what was done in the games. Like I would almost suggest before playing Halo 4, 5, and Infinite, you'd watch at least those two clips.
Yeah, because it does summarize it. Like, you do learn stuff from the librarian, but Cortana can summarize it in 15 minutes. So
and then as far as other ones in that, there's 8 episodes. Some of them are better animation styles than others. The Dragon Ball Z one was hilarious.
Spartan 1337.
Yeah, the lead Spartan. He's like, I'm on my way, sir, and it's animated in the same style as Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, like literally, it looks like Akira Toriyama. It's ridiculous and funny.
He's like, I'm gonna save everybody. He gets squashed by a dinosaur.
It's so dumb.
And that's actually what's interesting there is it introduces an AI that's disconnected from the rest of the fleet.
Yeah, and it just decides it's happy living on this crash ship, and
as mama to these children.
Like, it's so cool. And that's the thing.
And the power that these children have, it's insinuated that they are some sort, not that they're Spartans, but that they have Spartan DNA.
Mm-hmm. Like, because they've been trained.
Yeah, they've been trained, and it sounds like we woke up here. There were no children on that ship. It sounds like it was an experimental thing to grow humans, like a eugenics thing, because it's on a ship that was separate from regular fleet. So obviously it's some sort of Black Ops program initially that failed, and Mama is raising these children because they're like bare fist punching aliens and blast them apart. And yeah, it seems comical, but then you realize like the little hints they give is that Mama grew them.
Mm-hmm.
Mama birthed them out of her ship. Not that they were crew. Like, obviously there's no other crew, so everybody died on that ship. So, and they just sort of leave it alone, and that was funny. The best episodes are probably the Babysitter.
Yep, Babysitter I love. The package is good. But the animation doesn't hold up.
Yeah, that's the 3D animated one. Episode 3 or 4, I'm drawing a blank on the name. The one with the Spartans that go rogue and they find out that they had clones.
Yeah, that one, that raises a lot of morality questions, and that's what I love about it.
And how it ends, it's revealed like she went rogue, so they were going to try to capture her. Out of the 4 there's 4 Spartans in training that go rogue,
and only 2 come back.
Only 2 come back because the other 2 kill themselves. They say,
which
on
is
the radio.
brutal.
They see their clones and kill themselves. And then it's hinted that the one Spartan, the male Spartan, kills his clone.
Out. Yeah,
he killed his clone, so he washes out. And then she comes back. She leaves her clone, but her clone passes away of the natural causes from being weak anyway. And that when she sees her clone realizes who she is, and just says it's okay. Like, her clone comes to terms with dying by seeing herself in the strong Spartan and says, "It's okay. I always wanted to be strong."
Yeah, and this is something I don't know if it's connected. I would be surprised if it wasn't. In the Halo Infinite store, there's a piece of armor you can buy when it comes up.
With the bear charm?
Yeah, and that didn't click with me until today. I was like, is that the same bear?
Yeah, so she had a bear charm she threw away when she ran away, and then she finds her clone who has a similar charm, and she gets it from her.
Yeah.
And then and this is all happening in her head as her life flashes before her eyes as they were running a mission on, I forget if they said what planet it was.
I don't think it was anything significant because I don't remember.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
It was a base of some sort, and they run. She stays behind basically to help her team escape. Team doesn't escape. Everybody blows up. She gets shot and dies. And then the chief comes in the rescue mission, and everybody's dead. Mm-hmm. And the chief pays his respects to her and folds her arms up with her bear.
Yeah. And it's cool how they took the time to do this with an animated property. It does add so much to it.
Yeah.
Other things that are involved with Halo, I started reading some of the comics. I've only read Halo Helljumper so far, and you can guess why. But the artwork in these books is unlike anything I've really seen. It's more drawn in a realistic, almost Walking Dead style at times. I'm not sure whether I totally dig it, but I dig the stories. There's also a crap ton of novelizations tied in. The one that's probably the most important, I think it's called The Fall of Reach, and that's by Eric Nyland, I believe. There is an audiobook, which you can get from audible.ca. And you can get a lot of these out there and just look around. There's also books from Dark Horse Comics. There's a new one coming out in April, which is called the Halo Encyclopedia. I've had previous versions of it, and they detail weapons, races, relationships, technology. And I actually got to thinking about this the other day. I was reading Matt's book where it talks about Buck, and he talks about the planet that he grew up on, and he wants to be a fisherman, so that's a thing. But he talks about his time as an ODST in cryogenic sleep, and I got to thinking, well, how long would you need to go into cryogenics if slip space is instantaneous? No, it's not. I didn't know that. And I started
that it could be a couple of years to get across places to the vast. It's incredibly fast. It's faster than light, but it's not like it's like in Star Trek, warp is much faster.
Yes.
It's like, hey, we can get to the Pegasus system or whatever from here, but it's going to be 2 years, not instead of like 500 years.
Yeah, so I started doing some reading into slip space and cryogenics, and it turns out it's standard UNSC protocol to go into cryogenic sleep for anything over 120 hours. So that's why the crew of the Spirit of Fire is still alive in Halo Wars 2, which is cool. But going back to the book, Buck mentions something very, very specific. He's like, I stayed the same age, and my parents got older, and so did my little sister. And I got to thinking about that. That is something I never considered in Halo, because the Covenant have really fast slip space drives, but we really don't. So when you really think back to how the Covenant-Human War started, how do you defend an outpost being attacked by the Covenant if they're weeks away at best?
How about this? How does the chain of command work if an admiral is being told he has to go to a fight on the far side that takes 2 years to get to, and by the time you get there,
they're long gone?
either they're long gone, or let's say they went and they took an entire battalion into Slipstream to move the fleet somewhere else. They come across the other side. 5 years has gone by. The war is over. Are you still in command?
Yeah, like things can change so rapidly. I mean,
or what if there's a mishap and you get pulled out 50 years later? Are you still in service?
Yeah,
you have all the experience you need to. You're missing technology, but are you put back into active service with? Do you control your fleet, or do you get put into a different position?
I'm sure some of these answers are given in the expanded universe, and I really wish I thought to ask Matt about this, because I would love to talk with somebody at 343 or somebody from Bungie or whoever who's like a lore master, whoever writes the Halo Bible. I would very much like a copy of this, please.
Yeah, and the one that I've got a question about is with Nightfall. I guess up until now, or up until coming very soon, the final live action production they made, I felt personally it was the weakest. It doesn't mean it was bad, it just wasn't as good as the previous ones. It introduced some stuff that hasn't been brought up yet, even in Infinite. Specifically, there's that flood. It's not the flood, but it is the flood. That's attracted to technology, not necessarily living things.
I think I did some reading on that. I think those are the protoforms of hunters, because they're the worms. I think so.
Yeah, but the weird thing is, like, unlike the flood, they behave like it. They don't go after biotissue. They eat it, but they don't go after it to mutate it. They just eat us for whatever nutrients. They are attracted to technology, so it's almost the exact polar opposite of the flood.
Yeah,
and as they consume the technology, they grow and get more and become more. So that was sort of introduced there. Also, the idea, I know that some aspects of it, like the idea that there's a weapon that's being developed that can
kill humans.
Basically, an adaptation of the Halo technology where it only targets specific DNA structures.
Mm-hmm.
And it also doesn't explain why it doesn't affect everybody, except that maybe the idea being it has to be tuned to certain DNA structures. But I do not believe that, and we know some of the crew there, and they show like a former Spartan who had quit, which didn't think that was possible. There's characters, elements, and story plot lines that are clearly, they weren't just thrown in for no reason, but it hasn't been brought up yet.
Yeah, now I think I read this recently, that there are elements from Nightfall that will carry into the live action series, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I wonder how that will influence Infinite.
Yeah, like there's some very cool stuff in Night. Like I love the idea of a piece of Installation 04 turning so rapidly close to a red supergiant that at nighttime it's fine to be there, but on the other side it's 900 degrees. So you have 16 hours.
And that because it's so close to what happened, that there are new elements being created on it.
Yeah, like that I thought was a really cool idea. And if I ran a Star Wars game, I would steal the crap out of that idea, because that's awesome.
Well, I guess until they eventually maybe somehow make a official Halo RPG like tabletop game, that would be neat.
Which is funny, because I did ask Matt about that off air, I think. And maybe we'll see it someday. Who knows? It wouldn't surprise me, because IP holders and IP licenses change all the time, which is something.
And our tabletop games are becoming more and more popular. We're seeing licensed titles from tons of things you wouldn't expect pop up now.
Like Power Rangers.
Yeah, Power Rangers, Transformers, and G.I. Joe, and then you got all the Marvel stuff. Things are coming now that you wouldn't have expected or thought would have never even been thought of. You know, it's something that could come down the line, and I think it could expand some of the lore a little bit too. As it stands, I think lore-wise, when it comes to the extended universe and media, they've done a good job of it not being too convoluted. They're filling in the pieces here and there without going well. Like they're not making you search far and high to just to find something, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and one of the cool things I want to transition into right now is we're talking about the legacy of all the tie-in media. One of the things that I'm an expert at, because I love little plastic things, is I love toys. And I can actually recall the first toy that I had from Halo, and I don't remember, I think I bought it at a Microplay, which is funny because you and I were talking about that earlier before air, and it was a Halo 2 Master Chief. Kicking myself in the ass that I took it out of the packaging. I lost one of his SMGs almost immediately. I think I still have it somewhere. I'd really have to look. But that was done by Joyride Studios in I think 2004, 2003. And then McFarlane took over the license for a number of years. I had so many Spartans, and I'm kicking myself in the ass because I sold them a couple years ago. But I think I still have all my ODST figures except the rookie, because the rookie broke. And if I want to replace the rookie, I'm looking at over $100.
Yeah, let's be real. Not worth it on the secondhand market for that.
No, I mean, if I could see a loose rookie pop up for something around $40, sure, I'd do it. But I'm only going to pay for loose examples, and I can 3D print my own weapons.
Yeah.
So
at anything over 100, you can just get yourself, I don't know, another Halo game.
Yeah, like, although it's cool though seeing what Jazwares, who are the current IP holders and licensees for this now, because as I reviewed on last week's show, I talked about their Infinite helmet replica, and I've owned a couple of different helmets now. I've owned the cat helmet. I've owned, I think it was done by Rubies, it might have been, but it had lights in it, but it didn't have sound. But the visor had a matte finish, and there was it was tinted yellow, but not the full chrome. That's a thing called vacuum chroming or something, vacuolized metal that they can only really do in factory. And that's what my helmet has.
A process that is just not possible at like the hobbyist level.
Yeah, exactly. So having a prop level replica is something else. There's also been replicas done by NECA. I actually could have purchased the NECA Needler at a really good price, but I have no place to put said Needler, so I'm not going to. But it was really cool. When Halo 5 came out, Guardians, it was around my birthday. So Microsoft Canada, it was a different company at the time, I think it was. They sent me a Halo influencer kit. And in the influencer kit had Nerf guns. I got a Halo Needler Nerf gun, or Boomco to be more specific, which was done by Mattel, who had the license for a number of years too. And they produced a number of the Halo blasters. I have almost every single one except for the assault rifle, but I have the plasma pistol, the spiker, the SMG, the shotgun. I just got the ODST Magnum the other day. So big thanks to Facebook for that one. And I didn't pay and I didn't pay much for it either. Friend of the show, Jen, a number of years ago, got me, when we went to visit her back in 2016, I got the Brute Spiker, which is the dual knifed pistol that shot the giant spike rounds. And recently, I got these for Christmas. I got from Nerf, which is done by Hasbro. I got the Halo assault rifle, the M40, and I got the shotgun, which is the Bulldog, and I also got the Mangler, which is my favorite Covenant weapon.
You know what, dude? For like a Halloween, you should get. You said you got a helmet, right?
Yeah. Oh, I haven't even talked about that.
Wait a second. And you've got the guns. We should just find some cardboard and build you a warthog around your chair.
That would be awesome. Actually, you made me want to mention this because I've talked about this in a couple of different online communities, and I got to send a huge shout out to the Halo Props Facebook group because they kind of convinced me to do this. So as a lot of you know, I'm in the process of doing weight loss surgery, and I'm an amputee. So my body will look very different in a year or 2 years' time. But because in the world of Halo, prosthetic limbs are just an everyday occurrence, they gave me an idea. So the helmet that Alex was mentioning, I'm having an ODST helmet made for me based upon the Halo 3 one, I think is what I have it based on, maybe with a command module on the side. But the idea was brought up to me to become an ODST recruitment officer, like in Starship Troopers, where it's the mobile infantry guy. So I looked at dress uniforms. I looked at all that, and I have plans. So if I can lose the weight and convention season, and if it comes around to be safe to go to again, I will do up my wheelchair as a UNSC mobile recruitment booth to recruit people into the ODST ranks.
Do it.
It gets better. So because I have design experience, I'd probably go to Staples, print off a bunch of flyers, write stuff in universe, and I'd be like, hey, if you want to join the Spartan program, go to ThisWeekInGeek.net or scan this QR code.
And then subscribe to our podcast.
And hey, who knows? If we got 10 listeners out of it, I'm happy.
You know what? Even if it's just one person, that's fun.
Yeah, exactly. And those guys really, really encouraged me. I actually met a former Bungie employee on there who messaged me about how to paint my armor, because I think they worked on ODST. I don't want to say their name because I don't want to out them, but they were like, that group was so helpful and so inspiring. And yeah, like there's just so much quality stuff. There's been statues by Weta. I reviewed a Halo 3 statue where he was jumping at a flood combat form with dual brute spikers. PlayArts Kai had all of Noble Team, which I had to sell those a couple of years ago for like health issues and stuff like that. Trying to think of other people that have held the license. Hasbro holds the license for the Nerf blasters now. Jazwares has most of the toys from the world of Halo all the way up to the 12-inch Spartans, but you'll also see other people do higher end statues and everything like that. I stick mostly to action figures. Like, I'm very happy with the Spartan collection at the 6-inch scale, which is what your Marvel Legends, Star Wars Black Series, DC Direct, Transformers Studio Series are typically in that scale. And the license has been treated remarkably well. I've very rarely seen a bad Halo toy, and I'm hoping we see stuff like the Scorpion tank or the Wasp or the Pelican. Actually, I just remembered this now. Mega Bloks, who still has the Halo license, years ago, I've never seen this done before or since, they sent me the Halo Wars Scorpion and the Phantom, and they sent it to me twice. You may be saying, well, why? One of them was pre-assembled and super glued. And then they sent me the kit so I can build it myself.
I've seen that before. That's how some companies have done it for anything you have to weld together too.
Mm-hmm.
Or not weld, like soldering together. Sometimes companies will do that because not every reviewer has the skills.
Yeah, but it was so cool. So for a while, I had these awesome things. I built the Warthog they did, and I'm still trying to track down some of the Mega Construct stuff now because I want the codes for Halo Infinite. But yeah, so we're going to take another break here on ThisWeekInGeek.net, and I'm going to throw things over to some people that I had a chance to interview last week, and these guys were fantastic to talk to, and they are from Jazwares, and I'm just having to pull up their name right now because I had it on my phone and now I don't have. Actually, no, wait, I know where it is. I sent it to you. We're going to be talking with Gregory Mitchell. He's the Vice President of Brand and Action Collectibles at Jazwares, and also the Senior Designer, Jesse Hensley at Jazwares. And we're going to talk about how they've brought their approach to the Halo license now and going forward. And when we come back from that, we're going to talk about kind of what we want to see in the future and something special for you guys that will just be open to fans of our show over the next little bit. You might be able to win something kind of cool. So we'll be back, guys, right after this.
Sir, additional contacts. Boarding craft and lots of them.
They're going to try to take our MAC guns offline. Give their capital ships a straight shot at Earth. Master Chief, defend this station.
Yes, sir. I need a weapon.
Right this way.
Welcome back to the front line, Spartans. It is I, Mike 8260, your field commander for today. And as we've been talking here on ThisWeekInGeek.net with my co-host and AI companion, Alex, the producer, we've been talking about the Halo franchise. We've talked about the lore. We've talked about our memories. We've talked about the games. But one of the things we haven't had a chance to dive too much into is some of the merchandising that has been involved with this franchise almost since the beginning. So there have been many people over the years that have had the license to Halo, such as Joyride. They were the first action figure I ever had. I had a Master Chief with, I think, dual SMGs. Then McFarlane took over the line for a really, really, really long time. And there's been a couple of licensees in between. But with Halo Infinite, we got a new licensee to work on this, and that is Jazwares. They've done stuff from UFC. They've done some other really, really popular lines. But with Infinite, these guys came out of the gate roaring. There's the Spartan collection. There's the world of Halo. There's so much stuff to look forward to with your favorite Spartans, be they the Master Chief, a Brute Elite, or whatever. Cool stuff to talk about. So I fortunately was able to connect with these guys over social media, and I was able to get in contact with Greg Mitchell. He's the vice president of brand of action and collectibles over at Jazwares. And we also have Jesse Hensley, who's the senior designer from Jazwares. And we're going to talk about what goes into creating these virtual figures into something we can actually have on our shelves, or in some cases even kind of play with. So we've got Warthogs, we got Ghosts, we got 12-inch Spartans, we got so much to talk about. So we're going to dive into the Oni archives right now. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, thanks. Nice to have us. Appreciate it.
Excited to be here.
It's really cool to talk with somebody who's involved in something that I'm so passionate about. I've loved toys since I was a child, and I've always wanted to have more Halo figures. And like I mentioned off the top of the show, there's been so many licensees over the years, but because you guys are new to producing Halo toys, it's an exciting time to be in because you're at the ground level. Getting these things at retail is not hard, and you guys just offered a premium collectible, which we had a review in last week's show, which is the Halo Infinite Master Chief wearable helmet, which is one of the coolest things I've ever had. So you guys are in at a really cool time with the fandom. I mean, it's a brand new game. It's a brand new fandom that's really coming into it for the first time, because some people may have their first game may have been Halo Reach, could have been Halo 5, or some people it could be Halo Infinite, and some people may have never played the campaign. They only play multiplayer. We just finished Halo Championship Series Anaheim. So I guess I want to ask you guys, as my first question to you both, Greg and Jesse, where does your fandom come from, and what's it like to work on an IP like this?
Excellent question. Gosh, I remember, I'm a New Yorker, born and raised, living in LA now. I remember the week the Xbox came out. It was November 2001. I worked at MTV. We were in Times Square, and right across the street, across Broadway, was Mecca itself, Toys R Us, Times Square. Me and my buddy, coworker, we kind of skipped off during lunch. We went downstairs where the giant video game section was at TRU Times Square, and I watched him buy an Xbox, and we then plugged it into our old school CRTs and our little office at MTV. We played I think the Tetris ripoff that it came with, because we were afraid that if we got into Halo too quickly, we wouldn't be able to finish the rest of the day at work. But he did put the menu screen on, and we just listened to that iconic music while we did work for the next couple of hours. And that night we fired it up, and the rest is history. It's nuts to think that was 20 years ago. It ages me. It ages the franchise, but to your point, it's the most exciting time in franchise history, and it's really cool to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm 29, so whenever saying that it's 20 years now, that puts me like right in the golden age of childhood. Whenever Halo was coming out, I was, I didn't have the original Halo, but I got an Xbox in between the time Halo and Halo 2 came out. I started with Halo 2, and basically, I was playing every new Halo that came out. I think I had the Halo version of like the Xbox 360. Like, I've been a long time Halo fan since way back. So I'm excited. Always been excited.
So now that the game has come out and it's been out for just a couple of months, and 343 is really encouraging people to do creations with, like, be it, different elements of the fandom. And you guys put out a premium collectible, and there have been previous helmets before, but nothing quite like this. This one's a little bit different. What was it like to work with 343 as the licensor to create a premium collectible? Like, did you have access to scans from the game? Did you see like a prop from like the TV show or something? Like, put me in the room when you were creating this.
I'm sure the design part of it is much more fun and compelling for you, Jesse. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting process, right? The helmet was planned in the line from the very beginning. Like, if you remember our first Toy Fair Expo, we had a sample of the helmet up on the shelf, and it's just now coming out because of design and development challenges. You know, we can blame it all on COVID, but it's interesting. The process is basically, you know, we get assets from 343 that are basically ripped right out of the game. So there's not anything physical necessarily. Like there was no physical helmet that existed for us to use as reference. But we got the digital assets, and then, you know, the process becomes, how do we translate that digital asset, which, you know, might use a lot of video game magic, into transforming it into something that is actually a physical object that can be held and worn and actually work instead of just look cool on a screen.
Yeah, because when I got the helmet in the mail late last week, and I have it next to my Ghostbusters firehouse in my shrine of fandom, I'm one of the things I'm consistently amazed by is when I first got the Master Chief collection, not the Master Chief collection, the Halo 3's limited edition that came with the aforementioned cat helmet. I always wondered, if they made something like this, how would you see out of the visor? And I've seen other people who've done this, and their visors they didn't look like yours. So how did you figure that out, to have that gold copper visor look just like it does in the game, and you can see out of it perfectly?
Yeah, that's one of the advantages that we get from being, you know, in real manufacturing, as opposed to something that's handmade or fan made. You know, we have access to manufacturing that makes that possible. You know, the outside of it is vacuum metallized, which is a process that you can really only do in a factory, where you can get that basically mirror finish on something. And all we basically did was put that mirror finish on the outside of a clear visor shell, and then there's a protective coating to keep you from scratching it. But you know, that's just one of the advantages of real large scale manufacturing.
Yeah, because I gotta say, it's an impressive piece, and one of the things that I really like about it is it's a level of immersion that hits you like a child. And what I mean by that, very, very, very specifically, because your helmet has built-in electronics to it that has lights on either side of the Chief's face. But when you turn it on, you hear the shields charging, you hear hits, you hear weapon fire, you hear quotes from the game. And I'm 40 years old, and I'm not going to lie, for about 5 minutes, I'm sitting there in my wheelchair, and I feel like a Spartan for just a few moments. And that's a magical feeling that not too many toys outside of maybe Hasbro's Star Wars stuff has come close. But this isn't Spider-Man, or this isn't War Machine. This is the Master Chief, and that's something that hits a little bit different as a lifelong gamer. And to talk about some of the action figures that you guys have had a chance to do, you offer these figures in a variety of different scales. You offer them in the 12-inch scale, and you also have the 6-inch scale wood, which is the Spartan collection, and you have the World of Halo, which is, I think, 4-inch to 3.75, which is more of the Star Wars vintage style of scales. When you decide to do a line of action figures, how do you decide what scales work for what particular designs? For example, like, would I ever see a 12-inch Brute, for example?
Yeah, the beauty of this line that we're really proud of and credit to our team, to the 343 team for helping us develop it. And the vision that we shared was, the 6-inch figure, 6.5-inch figure, that's a very ubiquitous format right now in action figures, right? In the non-Funko Pop category of, NPD sales, most major brands and licenses top selling figures are in that, pretty everyday 6-inch format, which is funny because, think back, 10 years ago, that format didn't exist except for NECA and McFarlane. So it really hit critical mass. And naturally, it was very important for us to make sure we hit that and create the Spartan collection in that 6-inch format. And that's scaled as well, right? So each character is scaled to each other based on a 6 or 6.5-inch threshold. So naturally, taller Spartans are going to be taller. Master Chief is scaled to his actual, 7 foot. Was he Jesse 7'1", 7'2" IRL? Yeah. So we knew that there was going to be a built-in audience for that and a lineage from some of the great companies that you mentioned before. What we're really proud of too is that we were able to harmoniously and symbiotically have this 4-inch World of line live right there next to the Spartan collection. And that's pretty remarkable because there aren't a lot of action figure brands, be it a video game license, a theatrical license, a streaming show, who can sustain both figure formats successfully. Successfully meaning the fans love it, the sales are there, and the company's happy with the results. We've hit all 3 of those thresholds with this line, and we're really proud of that. The Spartan collection scratches the itch for the 6-inch collector. The world of, I'm glad you invoked Star Wars, and you think about like G.I. Joe and what we've done with the 4-inch figure there is create a scaled world of where, the grunts are grunt size, the brutes are brute size. The vehicles are, if they can't be 100% 1-to-1 scale like they're supposed to be, they're pretty darn close based on some of the limits of manufacturing and shelf space at retail. But the reactions have been so strong. People love the collectability and even the fidget playability of the world of. And naturally, we made sure to really nicely differentiate with washes, different materials, and naturally accessories when it came to the Spartan collection. It's a point of pride for us that we were able to make both those lines work as well as they have worked so far.
Now, speaking of vehicles, I'm a huge vehicle guy. One of my first vehicles I ever owned was a Power of the Force 2 snow speeder because I love the way those 3.7-inch figures fit in those vehicles. And I think in your World of Halo line, you've got the Warthog, the Mongoose, and the Banished Ghost, and I think you have the upcoming Mantis, if I remember right. Are you guys going to do anything like the Wasp, the Scorpion Tank, the Brute Chopper, stuff like that?
It's our goal to do as much scaled up vehicles as possible. I think that, we're now going into, we just finished, I guess, the first full year. We're now in year 2, and Jesse and I stay up late nights, many days of the week, planning out basically year 3 and 4 of the line. And the goal here is to kind of keep brick building that experience for ourselves and for all the fans, which is, if we can get bigger vehicles and scale them as closely as possible to the figures and to what they would be in game, that's the goal. And it's a goal that 343 shares with us as well. We'll do it carefully. We'll do it methodically. You mentioned the Mantis. We are so proud of how that came out. That was our biggest one so far. And indeed, we definitely have our eye on some really cool assets out there, which, they may not be size busters. Like, the Brute Chopper is not massively huge. But we're fans and we're big dorks for what we do. So to do a Pelican or a Scorpion Tank, that would be a dream come true. We'll do everything we can to make those types of realities happen, but naturally time, retail sales, and, of course, cost and investment will tell the tale.
Now, speaking of success of sales, what figure has been the most surprising success to you so far?
Good question. The hard reason to answer that is because part of what we do well is we make sure that we ship our figures in the right ratio, meaning we're always going to make sure there's Master Chiefs out there for sure. But, to do justice to the characters, to do justice to 343 and Jesse and John and teams like Art in creating these beautiful figures, we never want to over leverage one style over another if it's going to make one style suffer. So you look around a retail shelf, you're going to see a lot of different strategies on shelf, right? Sometimes you're going to see like a lot of the same character on a peg. There might be reasons for that. Either they shipped a lot of that character, or they didn't mean to, or they didn't ship enough of another character. I won't give away the secret sauce, so to speak, but we're very diligent about making sure that we do justice to the characters, to the beautiful figures being made, to then not overship or undership styles in such a way that we, they call them peg warmers, right? That one style that just kind of, oof, that one didn't move, did it?
Nobody wants that.
And that's what makes it hard to say surprising, because we case pack ratio these in just the right way, they all sell well. So there aren't actually any surprises, which is nice. The worst case scenario is you have a bad surprise, which is like, ooh, people really did not love that character. Having run the Power Rangers line for as long as I did, I took a lot of gambles and risks on the bad guys and villains because I think the core fans wanted them, and little kids especially wanted them because they wanted to fight good versus evil. But every now and then you'd have one of those very weird Sentai costumes that translated so strangely to an action figure format that there was maybe 5 or 6 of them on the peg at any given time. And you learn from those, and you calibrate, and you move on. Halo, no such problems, thankfully, so far. Jesse, knock your forehead, knock wood.
Yeah. I don't want to ship any stinkers, that's for sure.
Well, actually, you mentioned something about style, and one of the things that previous licensees have done with these, and you guys are doing it too, you have different Spartans with different configurations and different helmets and stuff like that. Like you've got Mark 5s, you've got elements of Noble Team, the guy from Halo Wars 2, Jerome, I think his name is.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you decide to, like, what elements do you pick out of a multiplayer suite for like armor pieces, be they like a chest piece or shoulder pieces or even knee pads, and how do you decide what characters to pick from a game? Like, I want Emil, I want that guy from Halo Wars, and hey, maybe, I don't know, Buck from ODST. Like, how do you decide who gets made? Like, is there like, do you draw out of a hat? Do you look at fandom? Do you look at social media conversations? Like, how does that decision process come? And then when you, as a designer, how do you add your own flair to it? Because I see a lot of people in the fandom groups talking about Noble Team, because getting an Emil right now is a pain in the ass, and because the figure looks so good. So how do you kind of leverage all that?
Well, you got most of it right, but the hat part, we now can just actually turn the Master Chief Spartan Collection helmet upside down and just put all the names in it. Right, Jesse?
Yeah. That's exactly what I do. I actually have one at my desk right now that, has all the secrets in it. It's my secret helmet. But no, realistically, it's all just a result of like a really awesome collaboration between us and the guys over at 343. We sit down and try and plan out every year with, who do we want to do? What's the story that we want to tell in this year? And how can we support that with our character selection? Like the first year with the Spartan Collection, the emphasis has been on, like you said, Noble Team from Halo Reach. So, we're doing some of those in every wave. And, for the 4-inch line, it was more of a Halo Infinite theme just to celebrate the new game and get all that newness out there. And so that's just kind of what we try and do. And it's really just a lot of back and forth. We write down what we think is cool. We show that to the guys at 343 and they say, hey, we think this is cool. Or, hey, here's this new upcoming thing that you guys didn't even know about. Maybe we could put that in somewhere. Like it's really as simple as that.
Yeah, it's a very collaborative and fruitful relationship. We were just remarking today, we have a call with them every week, and we were kind of celebrating a little moment where we were proud of what we were doing. And, we look at our partnership with them as kind of like the benchmark for any partnership, whether it's a licensor or a retailer or, even just ourselves in the office. Having collaboration, having good ideas, having the passion to see it through, it's all you could ask for. It's what makes making toys and collectibles really cool and very special. And again, you mentioned the such a good moment in Halo history, right? Infinite, the TV series about to come out in Paramount Plus, but also this 20th anniversary this past year. Being able to go back and pull out some really just great characters or new takes on classic characters, or like our GameStop exclusive 2-pack where, it's a then and now essentially of Master Chief from Combat Evolved and Infinite. It's just so much a rich history to pull from, and it's fun to do it strategically and creatively, wave by wave.
I was actually just about to actually touch on that when you talked about the GameStop exclusive 2-pack. Are you guys planning on doing anything involving the streaming show, or will there be more 2-packs maybe that could be a Walgreens exclusive or maybe a Canadian GameStop exclusive or anything like that? Is there anything in the works right now?
The beauty of being in such an exciting moment in franchise history gives us exactly those kind of opportunities. We've got a lot of cool percolating ideas, or even like straight up asks from certain retailers to say, hey, we would love to, do something and partner on an exclusive, whether it's a single pack style of a Spartan, a 2-pack, a multi-pack. So you're going to see a lot of news coming from us in the coming months about which retail partners will have something special to offer consumers to keep coming back. That's the joy of having a loved and successful franchise happening right now in the moment. And as you mentioned, one of the pillars of that too is the new series on Paramount Plus. We're definitely excited to get our hands on some designs and some of the assets from that show, because can't say anything just yet, but just as fans, there's some cool stuff there that would probably make for some good action figures.
I gotta say, it's exciting to hear you guys having the IP. I think you guys have treated it remarkably well, and it's a good time to be a Halo fan again. Like, I'm coming back after a long absence, and it does make me feel good that the license is in hands of people who are just as excited as me at 40 years old. And you guys go all the way back to when you were in your 20s, or in Jesse's case, when you were in grade school. It's fun. And I got to say thank you very much from my outlet. And I'm sure that the fan community feels a lot of the same way. I'm not going to speak for every fandom, because I'm sure there's some jerks out there, but thank you guys so much. I mean that.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And by the way, I knew what you meant when you said, there are jerks out there. We take every piece of feedback seriously. We're humble. We're students. We are constantly evolving and getting better ourselves to do better things. So when we hear criticisms, or, the occasional snark, or a very good piece of feedback in the Trojan horse of snark, we take it just as seriously and humbly as we do accolades and attaboys and pats on the back, because we love what we do. And we know that we don't have jobs like this without people who love something like Halo and want to buy Halo and have Halo in their lives. So we take it very seriously, and all feedback is good feedback, right, Jesse?
Oh yeah. I mean, you never know who's watching your YouTube video with 50 views. Let me just say that.
That's phenomenal stuff. And it's good that you guys are listening to the community, and you're participating with the community by being here. So once again, thank you so much. All right, guys. So that was my interview with the guys over at Jazwares. We spoke with one of the guys who's like super high up in the company. We spoke with Gregory Mitchell. He's the vice president of brand action and collectibles at Jazwares. We also spoke with Jesse Hensley, the senior designer at Jazwares. And hopefully you've learned a little something today about toys, about IPs, and just a little bit about Halo and why it's an exciting time to be a fan. So keep watching ThisWeekInGeek.net for more great info. We're going to throw things back to me and Alex as we begin to close out the show, and what we hope will be continuing for the future of Halo, as this game is supposed to be around for 10 years, and we have Halo Championship Series coming up in Kansas City, and I want to say May, and the Battle Pass Season 2, I think, ends sometime in April or May. Either way, I'd have to look on my Xbox dashboard to tell you for sure. But anyway, so this is going to be Spartan Mike 260 tuning out, and we will be back, guys, right after this.
Thanks for the tank. He never gets me anything.
Oh, I know what the ladies like.
All right, guys. Well, welcome back to This Week in Geek. Big thanks to Jazwares for putting that together, and Brett, who is definitely the MVP in making that happen. Hopefully, we'll be reviewing more Halo Jazwares stuff as the year goes on, and hopefully they can provide additional samples for that. So one of the things I didn't get a chance to talk about, because this is kind of where we're going to start to wrap the show up, but we're also going to talk about what we've seen, what we want from Halo kind of moving forward. But I didn't get the chance to talk about this because I never realized how important it was to me until I really started thinking about it. And that's the music of Halo. And it's been mostly done by Marty O'Donnell, who's the guy who recruited the Master Chief in the first place. He knew Steve Downes from way back when. I found that out when he did when Steve Downes did an Ask Me Anything on his YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago. But everybody knows that sound of Halo, but that's not the piece of music that really grabbed me. From the first game, there are two tracks that I utterly love. And the first track is called Covenant Dance. You can stream this on Spotify right now.
Okay.
Rock Anthem for Saving the World.
Wait, is that the one where it's like da, 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 da?
That's one of my favorite pieces of music.
I actually don't know the title of it, but it's like the we're gonna finish the fight, and now we're gonna do the big roll up for the final mission. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, and there's one that when you do the Warthog escape from number 3, I love that music too. But my favorite piece of music from the entire series is the overture for Halo 3 ODST, because it is so different from anything the series has done before or since, where it leans heavy into this noir jazz, very ambient type of music, very lonely feeling, and it so suits the game of ODST. And it's just it's a gorgeous piece of music, and that was the video game series that brought me into modern video game music, because then I started paying attention to the Jack Wall stuff from Mass Effect. I started taking a listen at the guy who did the music for The Last of Us, Gustavo, I think it is, or I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but
yeah,
it sounds so beautiful. And then Persona 4 and Persona 5's music really took me by like storm too. I mean, but it wasn't, because before Halo, my favorite video game music was to be expected anything from Mega Man, Final Fantasy 3,
Chrono Trigger.
Yep. Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy, Donkey Kong Country might be the closest I could say when it came to listening to a soundtrack cover to cover, so to speak. But with Halo, I remember going out of my way to get the MP3s. On that time, you could get them via LimeWire and Napster. And I remember listening to Covenant Dance just a lot, and then Rocket.
That's also in the era before
a lot of official game soundtracks.
Yeah, there were a lot of times the official soundtracks were from, I mean, the market basically came from Uematsu's stuff for Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy VII got so big.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was always big in Japan, but like,
over here, not so much.
Yeah, it was a very niche market. I almost feel like Final Fantasy VII specifically was the reason that CD soundtracks started to become big for gaming in the West. And then Metal Gear, I think, had one come out around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you saw, like, 2000, 2001 is when everybody started having CDs for everything. But there weren't digital storefronts. Like, yes, iTunes was around at this point, but most game soundtracks didn't show up there. So LimeWire and Napster were where they would sometimes do like live game rips or just record the audio from a game manually. Sometimes that was the only way to get it before it became this big thing. And Spotify's and other streaming services have been a boon to the whole industry for that.
I remember one of my first gaming soundtrack CDs I bought was Halo 2. And not for, obviously because it was Halo, but because it had an artist I didn't expect to see on it. Incubus. Incubus was one of the first groups I latched onto because I discovered them through the Spawn movie soundtrack of all things. But it was the first song I ever sang at karaoke was Drive. And Incubus did a almost completely instrumental song, or did several instrumental songs for the Halo game. And it was called Follow, First Movement of the Odyssey. And the level where this music plays is, do you remember when you're flying the Banshee as the Arbiter in Halo 2?
Oh, where you're going to all the different...
like that?
It's when you're with your group that doesn't trust you, right, at first?
No, it's when you're going to assassinate that leader, and he tells you that the Covenant is a lie. That's the mission.
So okay, yeah. The planet where you're flying,
the Banshee,
almost like Cloud City.
Yes, and that music. When I heard that song in the game, and I immediately said to my girlfriend, like, I must find this. We're going to Music World now.
We're going to Music World. We're going to Sam the Record Man.
Yeah, and it was so incredible because there's another song that's associated with Halo 2. and it's by Breaking Benjamin called "Blow Me Away," and I've recently rediscovered Breaking Benjamin, and I've been listening to Blow Me Away a lot. And there was actually a guy from Canada. He's a very famous video game cover artist named Little V, is I think his name. But he does a cover of Blow Me Away in a Master Chief helmet, and it's done as a metal cover, and it's really, really well done.
Nice.
But yeah,
that was a thing. Late 90s, early 2000s, getting rock and metal groups to do songs that you wouldn't expect in a game. Now it's more popular, but like in the mainstream, but you wouldn't have thought it. I think maybe the first time I heard about that was Iron Maiden had a Doom clone called Ed Hunter. Eddie being their mascot, and they did all the music for it. And then I can think of
Maximum Carnage and Green Jelly. I remember being a thing with
Megadeth
Three Little Pigs.
Megadeth did the theme music for Duke 3D, or they did a cover of it, and that was a big thing in the late 90s. I think it was for the Atomic Edition.
Yep. I remember that.
And since then, Megadeth has done more. They did a Gears of War song, just called Gears of War, for Gears 3 or 4? Something like that. Then Megadeth's done a few of them, and then you saw a little more of that, like you said, with Incubus. Incubus, I only have ever heard of from that one song. Was Wish You Were Here or something?
Yeah, I remember that the Cardigans, who did
you're gonna tell me the Cardigans did a theme song for Doom?
No, they did a track screen, and they were on the soundtrack for the first Gran Turismo, and they did the song "My Favorite Game," and that's how I immediately became aware of the PlayStation.
I think if we're gonna go into modern times, but before, like, leading into Halo getting these sorts of bands, the two that probably broke it wide open was how much Turbo was used, like Turbo Lover was used in Gran Turismo 3, and Young Turks in Vice City.
I would also argue Dragula from Twisted Metal.
Yeah, and then that was where it started to hit mainstream, and then you start seeing stuff like this, like Incubus. You wouldn't expect doing with Halo. I'm going to assume they've had a few other artists pop up in their music now and then, or do tribute songs towards it, because it's Halo is and was like the big Xbox brand, and it still is. Like it is to Xbox what Mario is to Nintendo.
Like, there are two nerd rappers that I really enjoy. There's Dan Bull, who's a British guy, and he's done a lot of video game raps. His most famous being probably the Skyrim song called Dovahkiin, and another guy called JT Machinima, and he did a song called Back in the Ring, which summarizes the entire Halo story from 1 to 5 in one rap. And I'm not going to lie, I listen to that whenever I play Halo Infinite multiplayer as my warm-up song. It gets me going. And because I'm that nerd.
That's the thing. Talking about how much the fandom is, that there's entire nerdcore groups dedicated to making music for it.
Yeah, like, it's incredible. Like, there are other artists like Miracle of Sound, who does music for Mass Effect. JT Machinima has done Assassin's Creed, Dying Light, Minecraft, Slender Man, all sorts of weird stuff. And there's an entire cottage industry around nerd rap, nerd rock. I mean, the Proto Men do kind of Mega Man stuff.
And Halo is a perfect property for it.
Yeah, like, you could write songs, like you could write war songs for the Spartans or the ODSTs, or you could write Covenant hymns if you were so inclined. Like, there's so much music potential there that I think's really amazing, and the fan community never disappoints.
Well, yeah, and this leads us into, what do we see with the future? Right now, we have Halo Infinite, we have the initial single player campaign, plus we're told multiple expansions over the course of probably 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
that doesn't mean that there's not going to be more games in and around Halo, but as far as like the main storyline goes, it's going to be contained to Halo Infinite.
Yeah, like I'm looking forward to seeing what's happening. So Halo Infinite launched in December of 2021. Right now we're in season 1 of the Battle Pass, which is known as the Heroes of Reach. I completed that early January, so maybe I played a little too much. Which is kind of funny. I actually had to play Halo twice to beat it because my review code didn't carry over my save data. So I literally finished my review. I was on the last mission. I went to bed. The game locked me out of my save. So I had to re-download Halo and beat the game again in a day.
And I remember I got the game on release day because you had the review code, and I beat the game in 2 days.
Yeah, you beat it before I did.
Yeah, I was like, I love this. Also, I found every skull except for 2 that I missed in 2 of the missions at the end of the game that you can't replay, at least right now. That's the patch is going to come later, so I'll get the rest of the skulls. Not that I would necessarily use them, but as a badge of honor to myself, I'm not somebody who can usually find these sorts of things.
Yeah, you've done more than me. I don't have.
I found 90% of them on my own just from exploring, and then the last couple. Well, there were 4 that I couldn't find, and I found out 2 of them I can't get because they were in missions that I already beat, and the other 2 were hidden enough that I did have to look up from somebody else. I was like, hey, I talked to a guy. I sent a message to a guy. I'm like, hey, did you find these? And he's like, no, but there's a YouTube video out now already. So there was somebody that had already found them, and I found them. But I have every collectible. I completed everything.
Yeah, like I'm going for the audio logs now. I think I've got about 90% of them. I got all the propaganda towers yesterday.
That's the hardest one to get.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. I've got all the Spartan cores and everything. So with this, there is a big 343 has been pretty forthcoming with talking with their community. There was a huge problem with Big Team Battle. It now works 95% of the time. We've had a couple of weekly events. There was the Tenrai event where you could get the Spartan samurai looking armor. There was the Cyber Showdown. Tactical Ops is in just a few weeks. And there's also the esports side of it, which is the side I'm starting to follow now. The team that's won the back-to-back championships so far is a team called Cloud9. Cloud9 was coincidentally enough the first armor I bought in the Halo Infinite shop because it's all black with these hyper blue highlights. It looks really good. Turns out I picked a winner. And Halo, I can't remember where, it was Halo Raleigh was in December, and then Halo Anaheim just happened. So back-to-back wins. It was Optic versus Cloud9. Fantastic series. Seeing high-level Halo play versus high-level Call of Duty play, which I used to watch, is really different. And I used to write Halo off as just a shooter with big shooty green man. Now I realize the multiplayer is so much more complex than I realized.
It's the verticality.
Well, it's not even just that. It's every weapon is useful in a particular situation. How quickly can you adapt? Are you smart enough to know when to disengage a fight? Because I watch other YouTubers online, and some of them I watch for lore, like Installation 00 or Halo Canon, and those guys are fantastic. And Eckhart's Ladder, who's also a fellow Canadian, and I watch their stuff. But I watch high level competitive videos now, and I was trying to think, why am I losing so many fights in Halo? And I got to thinking about it because I'm not thinking 3-dimensionally. So I'm literally playing that 4D chess crap, and a lot of people dunk on, say, the Pulse Carbine. The Pulse Carbine is the Covenant battle rifle. Is a really good way to think about it.
Everybody seems to drop it and not use it.
Exactly. Here's why you should. If you use that thing at mid-range to far range, those shots track.
Oh, yeah.
Those shots shred shields. So literally, I can kick the crap out of you with 2 bursts from a Pulse Carbine and 1 pistol headshot at a good range.
I'm not a big multiplayer fan, but what I did play around Christmas time with it, what I realized was people don't realize that it's not a good defense to throw up shields in the capture the flag one, and just sit there if somebody has a pulse carbine across the map.
It's true.
So I would sit there and I would shoot till, even when they threw down like the extra
bubble
weapons,
shields,
bubble shields, I would just sit there across the map shooting at them while it went to, and it was affecting their shields, and they're shooting back at me while other team members are creeping up from beside. And by the time I broke their shields, they were right there.
Yeah, like there's so many ways to approach fights. Plus, with the new armor abilities, you mentioned verticality. I've discovered something marvelous. In a lot of Halo's Infinite's gameplay is focused around the grapple shot. The grapple shot is a piece of equipment I will fight people on the map for, because when you have it with a gravity hammer or a sword, if you're a sword user and you've got a grapple shot, you are Assassin's Creed. And if you know how to use that thing well, you can cross an entire map in about one or two grapples.
Not just that, you're essentially a human torpedo.
Yeah, because it increases your movement. I think it's something like 120%. Like, it's ludicrous. And part of the thing, I see people using the grapple shot, but they're not using it effectively. One of the tricks I've been doing is I will snap it around the corner of something, and I'll swing on it like Spider-Man or Batman. And if I can get up in your face with a mangler, all I need to do to kill you is shoot you once with the bullet, and then hit you once with a melee. It's a 2-tap kill.
I have seen people, and I forget the map name. It's the one with the old artifact, the large one, with where they have the ghosts in there and everything.
Yeah.
I have seen somebody fly up and get a little too close to the ground. Somebody jump up, use the grapple, yank them out of the cockpit, kill them, and then take over their ship and fly away.
Yep, I've done that. There is an achievement for that called Skyjack, actually. One of my favorite tricks is
or yanking somebody's gun from across the map.
Yep, you can do that. Like, one of the tricks I've been trying to train myself on, the map is called it's the sand map, Behemoth. If you take where you spawn, there's always a grapple shot there. So I run and grab the grapple shot every single time, and if you are fast, you can run down in underneath Behemoth, grab the overshield or the active camo, grapple it to yourself, activate it, and your grapple shot that you had to drop will just be there. So you can have 2 pieces of equipment super fast if you are quick. And because of the way that level is set up, there's a weapon called a dynamo grenade, which are really overpowered and do need to be tuned, because you can shred someone's shields in about a second or 2 of exposure and pick them off with a pistol or a melee attack. And it's watching the pros react. I'm learning how different weapons work. I've learned I will never be a good sniper outside of the shock rifle, because it will also drop shields, but it also fires in bursts, and nobody thinks about that. If you get a perfect headshot, you're dead no matter what. But if you clip someone, you'll drop their shields.
I'm a beam weapon guy.
Oh, my weapon of choice is the battle rifle, which is clearly a Halo 2, Halo 3 sort of thing, because I can typically pick you off across the map. As long as I can see you, I can do 3 bursts in the body, 1 in the head. Or I think the rule is 2 taps in the body and 1 melee will kill anybody. But it's so much interesting to look at how different weapons work. I know enough. Don't pick up the skewer unless I'm fighting vehicles, because I'm just not that good a shot. I hate the cinder shot because I can't wrap my head around the physics, because I forgot
how it bounces.
No, not just how it bounces. When you zoom in, wherever you're aiming the reticle, you can make that shot move while it's in the air. You can drive the shot. Yeah, I've seen people zip it around corners and kill me with it. And the heat wave, I just found out yesterday, or not yesterday, last week, by the time this comes out, you can use the repulsor, which is essentially Halo force powers to push somebody away. You can repulse hard light with that thing. I deflected a heat wave shot right back in someone's face. I was like, you can do that? And I've seen high-level pros, they'll run they'll slide, they'll activate the repulsor as they're looking at their feet, and they'll jump triple times the height. And even when someone grapple shots you, or no, not when someone grapple shots, when someone uses the booster to get up in your face, you can push them away as they're boosting towards you. I did not know this. The physics in this game, if you're willing to take the time to learn them, are so interesting. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There have been problems that people have talked about. Like I mentioned, Big Team Battle was broken for months. As of right now, if you play ranked play, your ranks are going to be reset by the end of the month because they're trying to address anti-cheating. They're preparing for the next season. I imagine weapons tuning is going to be a thing.
Yeah, that's why I've held off playing. Not because I lost interest, but because I heard all this stuff. And I experienced one game where you can't turn off crossplay between PC, and that's where all the cheating's happening. And to the point where you've got players that I've played with that I've seen pop up before that are decent players, where 99% of the kills are one person. Something, like, it doesn't add up.
Yeah, like they're probably aimbotting, all things considered. I've had a few kills that are questionable, but I also don't play in ranked, and I also don't play in things where I should be encountering people. However, though, that being said, how rank is calculated, people have talked about on Reddit. People have said if you play social games, it affects your rank. So it can screw up who you're supposed to be playing with. So hopefully stuff like this gets kind of figured out. In terms of esports, which I was talking about, like I said, it comes down to learning from these people, learning what weapon for what situation. Because let me tell you, Alex, nobody expects the plasma pistol and nobody expects the disruptor. I pick those up every time because one charge shot from a plasma pistol will drop your shields even with an overshield.
Oh, wow.
And if you shoot somebody 6 times with the disruptor, they're dead, but they won't die immediately. 3 shots drops their shields. Another 3 shots does continuous damage. Their health won't regenerate for 10 seconds, and odds are that damage over time will kill them anyway. Nobody expects it because nobody picks up the disruptor. 9 times out of 10 on a map, it's still there.
Yeah, like I would say the most popular people always go for
rocket launcher, sword.
Rocket launcher, sword,
sniper,
energy weapon, like the one that's I forget the name of it now.
The Sentinel,
the particle rifle.
I don't see a lot of people pick that up. I'm seeing more people pick up the needler now.
People, I'm really good at melting people, but other thing people pick up, shotguns.
Shotguns, I'm finding it's weird. I don't like the shotgun so far because the Bulldog, you can treat it like a mangler with better range, where if you shoot someone once and then hit them with a melee attack, you can drop them. You can 2-tap them if they're close, 3-tap at a range, but unlike previous Halos, the Bulldog can't one-shot somebody.
The good combo to have is the particle weapon of some sort and the Bulldog. Yeah. Because if you run out, generally, even if you haven't killed them, their shields are down from a good blast of that, and then you just switch over to the shotgun and just waste them.
My favorite combination is Pulse Carbine Battle Rifle, because Pulse Carbine, I can take you out of range with like shots tracking. With the superior zoom of the Battle Rifle, I can headshot you.
I'm not a fan of the hammer.
The hammer, I don't like the wind-up time, but I like the fact that it does so much splash damage. Maybe I'm just not good with it yet. The sword is my favorite, obviously. Weapons,
the hammer is only good if you're going for... If you can sneak up behind a group of people that are doing capture the flag and they're protecting their base, and you can hit like 3 of them at once.
Yeah, like it's good for big team battle, but if anybody has anything with any decent range, they can pick you off. Like with me versus hammer people, I use the boost to get away and put distance between me, or the repulsor. In fact, one of my most memorable showdowns I had, it was on the map Aquarius, where up in the top of the spawn, he's got a hammer, I've got a sword, and every time he charges me, I use my repulsor. So I push him back. And it's like it's an old school samurai duel. Because we both start to circle each other. He takes a step, I take a step, and if I see him charge up, I blast him back. And when I take a step towards him, he blasts me back. Eventually, we both run out, and we just run at each other. And I think I got him by the thinnest of margins, because if a hammer and a sword clash at the same time, you won't do damage, but you'll be thrown back.
Yeah.
And I think I got him because I swung just a hair of a second later than he did. And I know my shields were down. So that was one of the best melee encounters I've ever had. And I wish I got my film from it, because that's something else I want to talk about before we finish up the show here. If you've been following my social media at Birdman Dodd across Twitter and Instagram, I've been taking a lot of in-game photography.
Which honestly, we can thank
Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, we can thank the PS5 for initially. So yes, this is an Xbox Halo talk, but we can thank them, and I'm sure that there's complimentary. We can thank Photo Mode for getting you super into that. Now you've applied it to all of your gaming.
Yeah, like it, and I've been talking in the Halo subreddit, and I talk in a few Discord servers about it. And I said 343, please give me a photo mode like Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut or Mass Effect Legendary Edition, because I am setting up shots now when I play matches. I'm paying attention to lighting. I'm paying attention to where I am positioned in the world, because you can freely rotate the camera, but if you hit a wall, you still run into the wall. You can't go through the wall to get the angle you want. So some of the shots where I'm really up close on the Spartan's face or the weapon, it's because I've tricked the camera into screwing up for just a second. I've got the perfect angle. And I didn't notice this until yesterday. My Spartan with the yellow armor, I can't remember the name of the team. It's one of the Halo Championship series teams, and they have a purple visor. In the reflection of the visor, wherever you are in the world, that's accurately reflected. I'm almost 90% sure.
Yeah, that would be the ray tracing aspect.
Like, it is so cool. Like, when I see the flash from the heat wave or the cinder shot just reflecting, I've counted commando bullets coming out of the gun. I've taken shots where the commando is just firing off bullets. When you reload the battle rifle, I've been able to freeze the animation where you pull out the clip. There's bullets in that clip. I am so impressed. I've counted. I did encounter one graphical error when I was reloading the Mangler. In the animation from third person, you don't see the shells being ejected. When you're in first person, you can see the shells drop out. But with every other weapon, you can see the bullets fly out, the bolt fly back. And I said this to somebody on the Halo subreddit. If I could have control of depth of field, lens, and of how I could position my lighting, I would be in this game for like a year, because there's so much light that I could play with. There's a shot I took the other day where my Halo is where my dude is jumping on live fire and the sun's behind him. If I could hit the sun over his other shoulder, it would look like they were an angel descending from heaven, because I threw the bubble shield or the shield wall down. And when you do, your Spartan throws up his hand like you're saying stop, right? So if I could have got the sun either over his shoulder or behind his hand to give forgive the pun, the halo effect, I could create some art. And I even had Xbox acknowledge me on Twitter saying, if there was a photography contest for Halo, you would be the leader right now.
Nice.
So I'm trying so hard to get 343's attention on hashtag Halo Spotlight. And I'm hoping I get it, because it turns out if you're selected for these things, the Halo community manager rewards you with an exclusive thing called the Ice Unicorn, which is a name tag and an emblem for your character. And if you ever match on the community play days, you get special armor effects. You get the ghost armor or the ice unicorn armor, which you can only get by playing against employees of 343. That is so cool. I've been to 2 community play days so far. Haven't matched up yet. It's a goal. I'm hoping I get noticed on Halo Spotlight because I think some of my photography is really good. Like, especially my shots with the Needler, I think look fantastic. So
I've seen a bunch, man, and it gets me hyped. Like, and obviously we're getting into the end of the show here.
Yeah.
I know we want to talk about where we see things going.
Yeah, like what do you want as the casual fan?
One of these things I thought about before recording, and one of them just last night that I didn't mention to you. The first is I think, without spoiling what happens in Infinite, there's a section of the map that you never go to. It's there, it's modeled, you can see it, you can't fly to it, you can't go to it. It's not part of the final missions. So I am going to assume that that is a section of the world that is not just there just for show, that it's going to be part of the next single player expansion. So I would love to see characters and storylines of things that had happened in Halo 5 pop up here. Or maybe eventually they'll probably do a thing where it's like, here's the map, but really this is only a quarter of the world and we're going to see more of it later on or something.
Now, speaking of this, I'm going to refer to Halo 5 for a second and right back to Infinite. Do you remember Spartan Locke's helmet, how it has that really shining blue visor?
Yes.
Do you remember the Spartan killer brothers you fight in Infinite?
Yes.
On their armor is Locke's helmet.
Yeah. And was it Locke that leaves the message? One of the final messages is that they're coming for me. There's 2 of them or something like that.
I'm not 100% sure. One of the things I've talked about on the Halo subreddit again is for me looking at the future of Infinite, I want a mission like ODST where it's what happens in the 6 months before the chief wakes up. I want a campaign. Why did all these forward operating bases fall? What happened to the survivors of the other UNSC ships? Because obviously you rescue Marines and Lasky survives.
Well, what happened to Blue Team? What happened to
Fire Team Osiris? Yeah, because were they on the station when Leonidas went boom? Who knows? Like, I want Nathan Fillion to come back as Buck. I want Fire Team Osiris or Blue Teams. I think Kelly is confirmed alive for sure.
There's a couple, I believe, that you hear their, and there's a couple of them. I'm drawing a blank on the names, but you hear the Spartan logs, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple of them that you hear that you don't discover their bodies or their resting places.
Yeah, or that's something else I'd love to see too. If you told me that it would be a campaign DLC, even if it's something we'd have to pay for, I'd be okay with it. If it follows the fate of every Spartan who fell, or here's my other thing, you get to play as a banished warrior. You have to fight UNSC forces. So you have to become the Spartan killer.
Well, you remember that? Remember in Forward Unto Dawn, the movie, the kid that basically almost washed out ends up being, he's either the captain or he's on the bridge crew.
Lasky.
Yeah, he's of the Infinite.
Yeah.
So would it be interesting if it turns out you see from his perspective?
Yeah, like if Lasky teamed up with a group of ODSTs or Marines or something like that. Like, give me a human perspective. Take the Spartans out of it if you want. Tell me a human story. I would be so interested in that.
Now, interesting. I'm not going to be able to touch on esports because it's not my bag. I know it's more yours. And the TV show we'll probably discuss just at the end here. But you know what I would like if they were going to do a spin-off game or a spin-off property? And I'm not talking like just the TV show. I mean, if they did another anime or if they did maybe they're not going to make other Halo games as in separate games, but let's say a separate campaign within this. You know what they've never done before? And maybe they've done it in the books. But what about, I'm not talking ODST. What if it was just a game or property focused on a team. Now that's after the war and everything has happened, where the Covenant are sort of on our side, or we're together fighting, yada yada yada. What if it was just a few random Marines, like not even enlisted people that were not enlisted but like drafted? We're talking conscripts, the lowest level privates in the Marines. They're not ODC, they're not special trained, and they're teamed up with another group of grunts.
I think that might be kind of interesting.
And like we always see the grunts as being stupid dummies, but turns out that these grunts with working with humans end up becoming tough ass bastards, right? They're not the standard runaway, jokes that they just get killed, their heads pop off and explode, right? Like it's a group of the lowest level humans with the lowest level grunts having to survive after their platoon leaders are dead.
I'm glad
they're together. This. Think of like a Band of Brothers thing with the people you would not expect. And as it goes on, by the end of it, you realize they're like a decorated group, but they're like the lowest level people you could imagine.
There's actually, I'm glad you mentioned grunts specifically, because in one of the Halo novels, one of the planets gets invaded by the Covenant, and it's a very bloody fight. And the Covenant leave behind Kig-Yar, who are known as Jackals, and grunts who are known as Ungoi. And it turns out grunts will eat people. So if we took your idea, how do humans overcome that internal racism of people they think are monsters? And if you took your idea of the Band of Brothers
and vice versa, like they're originally, you could set it at a point where they're still at war with each other, so that like you can see both perspectives. It's a bunch of grunts that are goofing off and everything, and they're being controlled by an elite or a brute as their leader. They get cut off from their leadership, they die. Some of them survive somehow. Then you have a bunch of Marines that are just conscripts in there, and their leadership dies. They survive. The war ends, and they're having to combine their forces to fight against the Banished or whatever comes next. And in this unified military force, the grunts and the privates are mixed together, and like I said, they have to overcome it. And then they end up like becoming comrades and friends, something you've never seen before. You've only seen high level people become friends.
So kind of like Halo Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
I'd be down for that.
And some of them don't survive, some of them do, and then like you could even flash forward at the end of it 10 years or something, and they're living together in colonies, and it's like, and they've been like, now one of them's a colonel, and there's a private that's now a colonel, and there's like whatever the equivalent of a major is, and it's a grunt, grunt is can you imagine, it zooms out and there's a grunt that survived, and he's now working with the humans, and he's in charge of a platoon of elites.
See, I think that'd be really kick-ass. I would also love to see, taking your idea, do you remember the one grunt high-value target you had to kill?
Yes.
What if Bip Bap, because I know that's his name because it's so weird, what if he was one of the people who worked with the humans and then just went nuts? And if you want to tie all the games together, you could do that.
Yeah, you could do like it's, or you could leave little hints, and it'd be like from the Marines, and it's like, oh yeah, not or whatever his name is. You make him Queequeb or whatever his name is. Yeah, he's kind of weird. We caught him eating a dog the other day. We told him that wasn't okay, and he didn't understand it. And then you could find more logs from like months and months in advance. And it's like, I can't believe it. If we didn't have them here with us, we'd all be dead.
Yeah.
And you don't realize till the very end, till you hear this guy's voice, give out like he's dying, and you hear what you think would be like another. You think it's an elite because we've been fighting with them, and what you hear is a grunt's voice, and he's like, "Oh no, he's gone. Don't worry, you won't die in vain." In his grunt voice, and you realize that these troops they've been talking about the whole time are grunts fighting with them.
Yeah,
and then that could lead into actually having a mission where you play as them.
Yeah, like I would totally be down for that.
Imagine playing as a grunt. You've never been able to play as a grunt.
Yeah, I that or a brute or something like. Yeah, I mean, for me to look forward to Halo Infinite, something I'd love to see is the store is getting better. In season 2, which begins in May, we're supposed to be able to earn credits through the battle pass. Fantastic. I want armor cores based after Locke from Halo 5 and the other members of Blue Team and Fire Team Osiris. I want, in the ideal world, I want armor kits for Mickey, Romeo, and Dutch, or Alpha 9 from Halo 3 ODST.
How about Alpha 5?
Yes.
Aye.
And because we're recording this in February, it's Black History Month. I'm really surprised. They did give us a free emblem and nameplate, but I suggested several times, and I got a lot of support on Twitter, if you gave out a free armor core based on Spartan Locke, who was played by Mike Coulter in Halo Nightfall, so Luke Cage, or alternatively, you can charge for this, but every single cent goes to a charitable organization dedicated to preserving Black history. You get an AI companion that's called Sergeant Johnson. That would sell so much. And I think it's a wonderful idea. So 343, if you're listening, consider it for next year. I think it'd be wonderful. And I think it would support a really, really, really great cause, because Call of Duty has their thing. I can't remember what it's called.
Other live service games do that.
Yeah, like I think that'd be wonderful. And I know it's been touched on that there will be something for 7/7. So Bungie games and Halo games in general have always had a history with the number 7 in it. So
that would be where 7/7. That would be
July 7th.
That's where I would like if they're not doing something. They might tease something during E3 or E3 time.
We'll probably see a trailer.
I would imagine there's a tease around June, and then I wouldn't be surprised if there's a reveal for the next
campaign drop, maybe.
Yeah, the next, even if it's only an hour event or 2-hour event or something they drop into it, I could see them teasing it for a September or October release.
Yeah, see, if you told me every year for the next 10 years or whatever, we get a Halo 3 ODST size game, which is about 3 to 4 hours.
Basically, if you gave us 4 missions, or depending on the length, either 3 missions of the same length of what they are in the game,
with cutscenes.
So you get your little books, your Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. If you did that you could get probably 5 years out of the storyline easily.
Yeah,
and then of course you have another 4 or 5 with the multiplayer.
Like they tried to do something similar in Halo 4, and it was called Spartan Ops, which did give you new stories as you completed things. But maybe here you can do something a little bit more elegant, because I remember reading online that the Halo 5 team was burned out after doing a lot of content. But if you've got the money, if you've got the resources, and if you're not doing crunch like CD Projekt Red or whatever.
If the plan is not to have to make a new game within 5 years, or like generally the turnaround time before this had been anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and you're planning for a 10-year thing, it means that for the next 4 to 5 years, they're not even thinking about making another game. So they could then spend the time. If you're only having to make 3 chapters, because I think, isn't there like 17 or something in the main game?
Something like that, yeah.
Somewhere between 14 and 17 chapters. I lost track because I did it all at once. But if you're only having to worry about making 5 hours of single player content every year, that's not too bad. That's not crunch territory. That's enough time to make sure that the game has time to brew.
Yeah, like I want this to be a success. I've mentioned how important Halo has been in my life, and I want to stay engaged with it. I mean, Halo was there as my first chance in the media. I've met Master Chiefs. Halo's never let me down,
and I'm even more excited because I was in on watching the press event for when they announced the show, which is rapidly coming up, faster than you'd think.
March 24th. Yep.
And I saw the meet and greet with the actors and the producers, and they seem to have a good handle on it. We discussed what we see coming. I know that as of this recording, there's been controversy, people getting mad. Oh, there's talk that he's going to be showing his face. And
and that was confirmed today pretty much.
Yeah. And you know what?
I'm fine with it.
He did in the other media too.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't mean now. I think people are afraid this is going to be like a Dredd thing where the first Judge Dredd movie, he shows his face the whole movie.
Yeah.
And whereas the second one was done the right way. I feel it's not going to be exuberant all the time. I think when he's in public, it will be on, and I think it will be off at the beginning of. It's going to be off, and also we don't know to what extent that is going to play. Because for all we know, the first couple episodes could deal with the origin of the Spartan system and the Spartan program, where he doesn't wear his helmet.
Yeah, like one of the concerns I saw people have is, well, if the rest of his team is hanging out with Master Chief, why is he in his suit all the time? Like, that would be a little immersion breaking. Like, I want a good story.
Immersion breaking? It's not immersion breaking if you give us a reason why he's wearing it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if he's in a hot combat zone, he may take off his helmet to grab a drink, but he's not going to go walking down the streets of New Mombasa in his friggin' Mjolnir armor.
I wouldn't be surprised if they give us a couple minutes where it does the flashback showing how they lost a member. I wouldn't be surprised if they canonize even more so a specific reason why he doesn't show his face.
Yeah, like, and that's something else too to talk about canon. They've already established, the guys at 343 and Paramount have said this happens in the Silver timeline. So certain events from the games have been changed, certain events from the expanded universe have changed, and it's going to be its own thing, because this is meant to bring in new people to the franchise. Like, me and my wife are watching Narcos, for example, right now. You might be wondering, well, why am I bringing up that show? Because my wife and I have a deal. We can watch, each other gets to pick a show. We have to watch it from start to finish before we start something else. And we're just finishing Narcos season 3 now. We haven't got into Mexico, but I'm on a time limit. I have to finish this with her before we're allowed to start Halo. So I'm on a clock. So literally the gun pointed at my head.
Don't worry. There's only like 10 episodes a season of that show, so you should be able to get through it.
Exactly. So it's really exciting. And IGN Fan Fest just happened last week as of this recording. There's a 30-minute panel with Jen Taylor. She's the voice of Cortana and the model. There's also the guy who plays Master Chief, whose name I can't remember right now. Otto, who's the director. There's the person who's the executive producer, the woman who plays Riz028, the other Spartan. Bokeem Woodbine's there.
He had a funny, interesting story in the press event. People were asked, what was your experience with Halo? Have you played it before? Most people said no, and that's understandable. A lot of people in the entertainment industry aren't avid gamers, or some of these actors were, like, I keep forgetting that we're not old, but there's a lot of actors in their 20s that have never played this before because they were too young, right? So his story was, he goes, I didn't play it initially till recently. He's like, but I watched my friends play through Halo 1 and 2 when I was a starving artist before he got famous. And he goes, I lived on my friend's couch for a year while he played Halo 1. So I thought that was funny. Like, he's the one that had like a real story behind it. But yeah, like it's going to be interesting. My father, who is not, a gaming, like Mario 3 is like the last game he played, that and GoldenEye. He's not a gamer, but he saw the preview for it and he's like, is that based on the video game you were playing? I'm like, yeah. He goes, do I need to know anything first? I said, no. And he goes, okay, I like that, because he likes sci-fi stuff. So he's going to be the guy that's the market for this. It's people that aren't necessarily huge gamers. And the market's there, obviously, for us. But they are really going after somebody who's like, I like Star Wars. I like The Mandalorian. That's who they're going for.
Yeah, like it's an exciting time, because think about this, Alex. Like, later on this year, we're going to have The Last of Us. Halo, that has been long gestating as a TV series with Spielberg, and he's still attached. This is a golden era. I mean, literally, we just reviewed the Cuphead show. Yeah. Who would have thought Cuphead would be on Netflix?
Well, Walton Goggins was just cast as one of the main antagonists of the Fallout show.
Yeah, and we've got a Borderlands movie that's supposed to be coming really soon. Netflix just inked a deal for BioShock.
Sonic has announced Sonic 3, and Sonic 2 isn't even out yet.
Yeah, and there's a Sonic TV series coming.
And this Christmas is Mario.
Yeah, like, as a child, I thought it couldn't get better than the first Mortal Kombat. We
lived through Mario. We lived through Double Dragon. We lived through Street Fighter. Mortal Kombat came out, and we were like, "Yeah, this is the best it's gonna be." And then Doom had that 5-minute scene where it was actually first person. You're like, "This is the best it's ever gonna be."
Yeah, and then after that, maybe the new Tomb Raider, maybe.
I mean, we really didn't get anything solid. Like, you could argue the Prince of Persia was an okay movie; it just didn't do well.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of real
Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, there wasn't a same thing. There wasn't a lot of real interest in making a good and well received TV show or movie based on video games until very recently. And you could argue a few little things, but you know what really did it, I think, and set things into high motion was probably Sonic.
Yeah,
because it was the highest grossing film. I mean, obviously that was the pandemic involved, but it grossed such a high amount, and the fact that the fans made them redo the graphics,
yeah,
it would have tanked. And when they realized that it wasn't just fans whining, it looked bad, and because they didn't seem to care about the property, when they did put the effort in and cared, people came out in droves, and it made $200 million.
Yeah,
and that was, I know that this show has been in development and had some issues for about 8 years now. And it took 2 years to film the first season because of the pandemic. But they're there, and ahead of release, they're already like, "Hey, we're going to do a second season."
Which it wouldn't surprise me if it's already half in the can now.
And they just waited to announce it, right? Like,
yeah, that's kind of what I think. If I had to guess, I mean, we really do live in a very special time to be a video game fan. Like, there's even talk that Amazon may do Mass Effect properly. Like, because I know Henry Cavill had a piece of paper on Twitter like about a year or two ago, and you could see lines about Commander Shepard in there.
You say that, but then he'll turn out to be Garrus.
I would be totally there for that too.
That's what I'm saying, man. And I mean, if you're doing, like, I know this is Halo, but if you're doing Mass Effect, you got to get, people. You got to get Admiral Hackett, and you got to get a few other people you got to get the same voice actors to play the live action roles.
Oh yeah,
and that's here. Like, are there people other than the primary cast here that you hope to see pop up? Do you think we're going to have Steve Downes show up somewhere?
Oh, he'll be a cameo for sure. If they didn't, I'd be really surprised.
You think he'll be another Spartan as a joke?
I think they're going to have him be a UNSC guy. You'll see him as like a desk sergeant or something,
or would he be an ODST shock trooper dropping in? And then just die.
I think that'd be cool too. I mean, I want the guy who did the voice for Sergeant Johnson to get a kind of shout out. I would love to see Nathan Fillion as Buck.
Was Johnson the one? Which one's the one that gets the flood on him first and just basically goes crazy and gets torn apart?
That's Sergeant. That's Private Jenkins. Yeah. That'd be pretty funny too.
Oh God, they're all around me.
Like, I want Jenkins, I want Johnson, I want Buck would be great. Trisha Helfer could play Veronica Dare, because I think that's who did the voice for that.
If we get the Arbiter, do you think we're getting Keith David?
If we don't, there will be blood.
Yeah, and the same way, like, he would have to play Anderson in Mass Effect. Like, there's no way you could get somebody else, right? So, he's tied so tightly to these kinds of games. And yeah, you're right. I think the Arbiters, if he shows up here, is going to be a CG character. They've got to get him.
Oh yeah, or if they do a different Arbiter, I don't know, somebody really good sounding, like
Patton Oswalt. No,
Corey Burton would be my pick.
Who would you like to play the Prophets?
Ooh, I want Michael Ironside
as one of the Prophets.
You
know who I'd like as a Prophet of Truth?
Who?
I'm drawing a blank on his name. He does Pinky from Pinky and the Brain.
Maurice LaMarche?
Not Maurice. The other guy.
Rob Paulson?
Yes.
I could see that.
Paulson. You know who would be funny as a maybe as a brute or somebody if they start having more talking roles for some of them.
Mm-hmm.
We should get John DiMaggio.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I was just thinking about this. He plays the police captain from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh, Andre Brewer.
I want him as the Prophet of regret.
Yes, that would work well.
Like, I want that gravitas. I want that really deep voice, and I want that subtle menace to it.
And you want each of the prophets to have a unique sounding voice, even if they look the same.
Yeah, like I want something that really,
because each voice should represent their title.
Yeah,
like what they represent, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like the truth should have a Paulson sort of voice. It should have a higher pitched "I'm holier than thou" voice.
Mm-hmm.
Regret, yeah, that's a underbrewer. And then what's the other one?
Mercy, I think.
Mercy, somebody else. Now, it would be interesting if, because they're going a little off script, they go into different territory with other prophets, and we could get, like, how interesting would it be if one of the prophets, like, you know, it's announced we killed one of the prophets, but we actually didn't, and one of the prophets defects.
Yeah, well, I was actually, when we were watching Halo Legend, they talked about a prophet, and that was the prophet of their like supply chain system, and I got to thinking, the prophet of plenty, or the prophet of generous, or the prophet of generosity. It turns out they're really big assholes, but you could do so much with this, and that's what I'm excited most, and I think that's how we'll close the show.
Or you call it like the prophet of pity.
Yeah.
So it's like prophet of pity. What does he do? Oh, he's in charge of giving out the rations to the troops.
And it turns out he doesn't care. Because that's what I found out why the Covenant are named. I think that's how they're named. They're the opposite of what they're supposed to be. And I'm just thinking, okay, that's really clever. So I guess we can say we're excited for this. And I promised you we were going to do something special here at the end of the show, and we're going to. So because you've stuck with us for the better part of like 2 hours now, I'm going to give you something. So between now and March 4th, so that'll be next week, I have 5 Xbox Game Pass Ultimate codes for 3 months to give out. And these are for North America only. I do apologize. But big thanks to Microsoft Canada and the Halo guys for giving these to us. So I'm going to read the first one. And this one comes from Jay. Jay says, was working at EB Games for the launch of Halo 2. After my shift, I came home and played the campaign and multiplayer for 2 days straight. Slept like 3 hours. One of the best gaming experiences I've ever had until today. Keep being awesome, Mike J.
And we should say that these, you didn't explain, these are, we've asked people to send in their memories.
Yeah, so if you email feedback@thisweekingeek.net, subject line Halo Memories, that is what we will do. We will read more of these on the Sunday show, so on March 6th, we will announce all the winners, and I will email you the codes personally. So the next one comes from Matt, and Matt wrote, back during the original Halo, 3 of us used to sneak back to my friend's dorm and play on Xbox during any break after class. We were addicted. It was fun. When I went back to Niagara College for a different program, I had it on PC and used to play it online with 4 others in class during lectures to make things interesting. So that's a big thanks to Matt and Jay for sending in their memories. And like I said, we want to give out as many of these codes as possible. I'm going to work with more partners during the year to do more giveaways here on the show. So once again, if you want to get one of these 3-month Game Pass Ultimate codes, save yourself a few bucks, or maybe you want to try out the service for the first time, now's the time. So feedback@thisweekingeek.net, and we will do our best to read as many of these on the show. If we get more than 5 or 6 entries, well, then it goes into my Master Chief helmet. Thanks, Jazwares. And we will draw names from a hat when I see Alex next week. So I guess, Alex, it is time to plug you back into the ship. It's time for you to take us back into slip space, and I guess we're setting course for home. So for This Week in Geek's topic show for the first quarter of 2022, we have been
Alex, the producer.
I have been Mike, otherwise known as Spartan 260, signing off.
Don't make a girl a promise if you know you can't keep it.
I am not leaving you here.
John. I've waited so long to do that.
It was my job to take care of you.
We were supposed to take care of each other, and we did.
You should leave me here with the rest of the garbage.
We all fail. We all make mistakes. It's what makes us human.
I'm sorry, Chief, but how have you ever failed?
I should have protected Cortana. Stopped everything from going wrong. I failed her. I will not fail you.
We've got a new contact, unknown classification.
It isn't one of ours. Take it out.
This is Spartan 117.
Anyone hear me? Over. Isolate that signal. Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.